let me see, a while ago now, about 10, 15 minutes ago. But we just started, I'm sharing it now after the team looked into it. But again, I don't know how much impact that had. That could be just a rogue group, not part of the organization. Just, again, take it with a grain of salt. I'm just sharing the information as we got it.
And it seems quite an expensive thing to do, right? To pay for tickets to go to have,
It
say,
is
a
not.
quote unquote insurrection just seems
It is not.
dubious.
It is not. Not in Brazil. It's
Go
just
ahead,
buy
Alan.
tickets in a bus. It's not
Yeah.
expensive.
So
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
yeah, that's the point. So has anyone, Alan or Matthias or Rose alerts, have you guys seen any such reports before I go to Jim?
Yeah, I'm seeing the reports right now. I added one of the reports to the top of the thread there, where group messages have surfaced in Bolsonarista groups offering all expenses paid trips to Brasilia. As Alan said, it's not expensive; it's literally a bus trip. So this is not like it's not like they funded this expensive, private jet or something like that. This is, I mean, I don't know how true this is, but regardless, it's not very expensive. It wouldn't be very difficult to fund such a thing. It's also
But
worth
that would
pointing
make
out.
a big difference because then that's an organized kind of effort as opposed to a spontaneous. 'Cause that's what's interesting
Your
about
mic,
this.
it's just like
Yeah,
your mic
it
is,
does. It does.
pretty
Yeah,
bad.
it cuts in and out. But like, yeah, no, I heard what you said. Like, it would. Yeah, it would indicate that it was an organized action versus something that's spontaneous. And similar accusations were made against Charlie Kirk of TPUSA. Because
Exactly.
before January 6th happened, he chartered a number of buses to go down to the not to the Capitol but to D.C. right to attend Trump's rally at his speech, and they tried to use that against him, claiming that he had organized or had been part of the Stop the Steal thing, which he wasn't. Right, there are two different events going on January 6th in 2020. So it's very easy to draw that comparison, but that's not actually what
I,
the case.
I have some great questions from the audience, but I want to go to Jim if you don't mind, Alan, and then we'll give the mic to you, Alan, then Dallas and Harry. Jim, go ahead, man. And again, thanks, Jim and Nick. Jim and Nick, thanks a lot for helping me organize this space. Go ahead, man.
Yeah, hey, Alan or Cavendish, I'm just curious from on the ground in Brazil if there's any attempt in any of the media in Brazil, anywhere, to try to tag this to what happened on January 6th, or any other places that you're hearing from, and how you would address that.
Yes, they are trying to tag it. The only one media that is not tagging like January 6th is the media that have been censored by the Supreme Court Justice Alexandre de Moraes, the guy who ordered my arrest and deportation. Alexandre de Moraes is a Supreme Court justice. He was criticized even by the Washington Post and New York Times. So it's not a political criticism. It's a very technical criticism on him because he has arrested a lot of people, indigenous people, reverend pastors, journalists. He closed my company in Brazil. I need to reopen it here. My Twitter was
I'm
was
so
back.
sorry to interrupt. We have
Go ahead.
some breaking news
Go ahead.
from Brazilian
Brazilian
media.
security forces take down.
Sorry. I got muted. Yeah, so you were both speaking at the same time. Breaking for news, you were just saying something?
Yeah, I'm so sorry to interrupt, but
No, all good, man, all good.
we're getting reports from Brazilian media that the security forces have regained control of the Congress building, the presidential palace, and the Supreme Court building.
That was quick.
So that would corroborate the videos that we've been seeing about a half hour ago with all the tear gas deployment and the arrests being made. It would kind of fall in
I,
that similar timeline.
I'm
So you could.
live and it's not true. I'm sorry. I'm live. My
What
channel is
is? Let's
live right
see.
now covering it.
Can you pin your channel above, Alan, if you don't mind? Pin it above in the space. So yeah, the way you do it is you go to the tweet.
Only outside of Brazil you can see that. Only if people in the United States or outside of Brazil can
Yeah,
see that.
most of
It's my
us. Yeah,
Yeah,
profile.
most of us are outside of Brazil. Yeah,
yeah.
like
So if you
I,
go
I
to
know for a
the
fact that Brazil censors a lot of the news in Brazil for Brazilians. So for instance, what you just reported, the fact that the protests are still ongoing within the capital, that is not something that's being reported in Brazil because they censored the news. They literally censored the news, and that's, to my understanding, part of the reason for these protests today is that of all this censorship, like you cannot say anything that goes against the official narrative that will get you in trouble, right? And that's the reason why
It
you're in the
seems like
United
that's
States
true
and not
with
in Brazil.
it. It seems like that's true with Brazilian Twitter as well. I've heard there's been a lot of complaints about that. Elon has addressed it. He's been trying to get a hold on it. Alan, can you give us more details on what it's looking like on the ground right now?
Before we go to Alan, sorry, Rose alerts as well. You were mentioning something on the breaking news. Was there anything you wanted to add before we go to Alan?
No, Alan, you're good to go. So I'll keep
Cool.
an eye out.
Thanks, man. Yeah, Alan, go ahead. Do you want to ask the next question?
And by the way,
Is
you might
Alan
let
in
Alan know
Brazil? Is
how
that what he
to.
was saying? That he's actually in Brazil?
No, he's streaming it live. So he's living in the US now for various
He's able
reasons.
to do it from the United States because there's no suppression of free speech in the US.
What is he streaming live exactly? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Alan, do you want to answer that one?
I have a lot of friends in there.
Okay, and they're streaming
They're
it for you and
sending
you're
you
posting
live
the videos.
footage? Or
Yes, live footage. Yeah, live footage.
Hey Mario, can you help him understand how to put that up into the space?
I will. I'm actually going to pin it now. So I'm going to your profile because anyone can do it.
It looks
so
like he has.
Okay, perfect.
Alan, eu preciso falar português. Você me liga?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
Eu preciso falar português contigo. Você me liga.
Okay, sounds good.
Perfect. Thanks, Carolina. Dallas, you wanted to jump in?
Yes, thank you guys for having me. Good to see everybody. So I want to touch back on a couple points. So real quickly, so like to Ian's point, like if there's issues with the Supreme Court and people not even being able to discuss whether an election was conducted fairly, like I mean, like are people really surprised that these kind of things are happening when people aren't even allowed to discuss? And like how often are those people right in history where you're literally trying to prevent discussion of something? I think that's pretty telling. Number one, I think. I've spent a lot of time in Brazil and Colombia as well, and like anybody who's ever been in those countries during an election, it's pretty easy to spot. Some of the socialist parties and others literally on the street paying people cash for their votes. So that's I think another part that a lot of people in certain countries, especially those don't necessarily always feel super great about the results of their elections. I think Harry mentioned earlier, like, it's a playbook for far right leaders. I think that's funny. I mean, I think that's just seeing the world through kind of a Trump derangement syndrome lens a little bit. I mean, you have people like Hillary already sort of like setting the table to give expectations that there's going to be issues with the next election if Democrats don't win. And at the end of the day, like people should be able to question it, and not sort of like imply people doing or saying things that they didn't, say or do that they've sort of done to Trump. There's enough fair criticism to go around. And, again, like you have people in these countries who feel like they're not being heard. And if they don't feel like they're being heard, if they don't feel like the processes are being conducted by the elected officials to look into, their concerns, if there are any legitimate ones, and they can't talk about it, like what else are they really supposed to do? Like just accept an election that you feel is unfairly conducted, that did not represent the will of the people accurately. They may be wrong, and I'm not saying Bolsonaro's like an awesome my ideal candidate per se, but it's just at the end of the day, it's funny that everyone's just so quick on the left to sort of compare this to January 6th and like what an outrage by right-wing leaders, but it's like I don't really hear any of those same people at all discussing the fact that like they're trying to suppress people talking about this and that they're not even conducting fair elections to look into these processes. Like you can't really be surprised at the results that people are pissed off. Like I mean, wouldn't you if you felt like
before I give
I find
Harry
it interesting. The French. Did you guys already talk about the French president already? The president of France coming out and saying that he supports Lula. Have you guys already discussed that?
No, we have not. I think you'll see it more and more presidents. I wouldn't be surprised if more and more presidents would endorse Lula.
Even Mario Maduro from Venezuela was going to go to his inauguration, but he was scared of getting kidnapped or killed. So if you have,
he was afraid to be kidnapped by the people.
Exactly.
Who?
So
sorry.
Celebrating
Maduro,
election, that you have Maduro from Venezuela wanting to go to your election. Like what? I mean, what does that say about you? Probably not good, right?
Yeah. A lot of even Lula supporters are just they don't want to go there. Yeah, sorry.
I'm sorry. There is one point I would like to make.
Hold on. Before you make the... No, I was going to ask Ian, what did you just say? And I'll give the mic back to Alan. What did you just say?
Oh, no, I said that a lot of leaders are terrified of going to Brazil because of the unrest that's going on there right now. So even his supporters are, even though they endorse him, they know that they would be put in serious mortal danger if they were to go there. And I'd like to go to Ellen, have him weigh in on this.
Yeah, the one thing I would like to point here is the fact that even Biden administration declared the PCC as a terrorist group. So this is a declaration by the Secretary of State of United States under Biden administration. So these drug dealers are terrorists in the United States. And a lot of people are together with them. A lot of politicians are together with this group in Brazil. That's not my company that is only reporting it. Even mainstream media and outlet media was uh, was reporting it. And due to the fact that a lot of politicians are together with drug dealers, and also the fact that the Supreme Court released some of them saying there is no enough proof to keep them in jail, and they left the country right after the Supreme Court let them go out. People are so frustrated in Brazil with these crimes and drug dealers doing whatever they want while the Supreme Court is ordering arrest of reverend pastors, indigenous, regular people that are not doing anything aggressive or radical or so forth. So then you can understand there is not a political protest. It's not a right-wing protest. You can see people on these protests that they have no clue what is right or left. You need to remember in Brazil, after reopened the democracy in 1988, we still do not have a right-wing party. Just to give you an idea, so we do not have a Republican Party in Brazil. So it's not a political. It's more like people trying to be heard. I understand people that can criticize what is happening, like destroying buildings, all the stuff. I agree with the people that will say these need to be criticized. But the fact is, when you are in a country like imagine in a whole country like California, where you do not have your guns and the drug dealers invade your house and they can do whatever they want. Imagine a whole country like California. What are you gonna do? So this is the situation in Brazil. We do not have Florida. We do not have Texas. We do not have
Oh,
anything like to go.
I wanna quickly just we have just to let you know, Ian, because you asked me to invite Mr. Adler.
Yep.
David is joining us in a bit. I've just sent him through an invite
Okay, that's
link.
fantastic.
Alan, I appreciate you sharing this, and I've got more questions for you in a bit as well. Harry, I know you've been waiting for a while. I'll give you the mic while waiting for Mr. Adler to join.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond quickly to what I believe Dallas said about a point I made about talking about this being similar to January 6th and having, I think what he said was Trump derangement syndrome, and how Hillary Clinton is saying that the next election is going to have problems. I just want to quickly fact check you, and the fact of the matter is, when Hillary Clinton's talking about problems in future elections, it's not anywhere near to the claims that Donald Trump made. It's more of a talking about voter suppression laws that have been instituted in a lot of Republican states, which have proven to have a negative effect, especially on people of color. I mean, for example,
I
in
don't
North
think there's any
Carolina,
proof of that.
I can talk about it. In North Carolina, they instituted a voter ID law in the Supreme Court in that
How
state.
does it affect people of
Wait,
color, though?
hold up, one
Okay,
second.
I'll let you go first, and then I'd like to rebut.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love for you to come back. But North Carolina instituted a voter ID law, which the Supreme Court in that state said targeted minorities with, quote, surgical precision. So that's kind of one of the problems that Hillary Clinton has talked about a lot. And the fact of the matter is, foreign interference in our elections, it's not a conspiracy theory. That's fact. Both Republicans and Democrats in the Senate and on the Intelligence Committee came to that conclusion that in 2016 and 2020, countries like Iran, China, Russia, tried to influence our elections in certain ways
I disagree with that
help.
as well.
I mean, okay.
Ian, actually, I will let you. Harry and Ian, I think it's a good point. Ian, before
I want to address the first two points you have before
you do, guys, So now, Harry, the reason I'm interrupting you both of you guys is David doesn't have much time, so I do apologize, and I do want Ian to respond to Harry. But Adler, Mr. Adler, thanks for coming in, man.
Happy to be here. I need to catch up a bit on where the conversation's at. I'm hearing a lot of people suggest that today's protests on the Capitol, if we can call them that, whatever, insurrectionary spirit is somehow justified by the fear of Second Amendment infringement in Brazil or something like this. Where are we? The Californification of Brazil?
I don't have a lot of time, Mario. I'll explain to him real quick in a
nutshell.
Thank you, Carolina. When we tried to coordinate the entire situation that happened after the J6 here. We have 78 people in jail right now that are being not only mistreated but denied, stuff. So what I wanted to talk to Alan is to preparing on how their government is going to treat these people. January 6th is something that, as of right now, we're still suffering the consequences of. So we're going to be productive. I just have to move forward into the fact that, yes, people are going to be demonized. People are going to be in jails at the moment, and your government is going to be abusing these people. So my advice to everybody, and I don't have a lot of time left, but you have to coordinate and strategize. Start calling your lawyer. Start calling. I don't know if you have a constitution or what you call it, but for us,
There is no
78
trial,
people.
Caroline. I'm sorry. There is no trial in Brazil.
Yeah,
All these people are being arrested.
Because
So guys,
I'd like to go back to David. Yeah, I'd like
David,
to go back
please,
to David
because Caroline doesn't have
bring on
much
this.
time either, so we it took us a while to convince him to join us. So David, and I'll go to Carolina right after, and then Jamil as well. David, is that we just give us a general overview. The latest update we have from Rose Alerts and Matthias from Breaking 4 News. They've been updating us on a regular basis, so hats off to them. Is that a lot of people are getting arrested and the people are getting cleared, but then we had Alan refute that, say he has a live stream and that doesn't show this. So I see you tweeting a lot with the latest updates. What's the latest? What does it all mean? How does it compare to January 6th? Should we even compare it to January 6th? And how common or uncommon is this in Brazil?
Yeah, I think that the situation has changed a lot from where we were 2 hours ago, in the sense that the critical distinction being made is between the army and the federal police, and even thinking about the role of the police is further distinctions need to be made. We heard in Lula's speech an absolute fury at the complicity of the federal police in basically accompanying, supporting, and facilitating the physical, violent, and completely kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Flagrantly illegal attacks on these institutions. We can talk about what the consequences are legally, but I think that the paper trail, the videos filmed by the insurrectionists themselves are pretty evident in terms of the destruction that's been wrought on the Supreme Court, on the National Congress, and of course on the presidential palace, unprecedented in the history of democratic Brazil. Now the army has come in. We saw that the stun grenades from helicopters. We've seen slowly these evictions from Supreme Court, eventually from the presidential palace, and now again from Congress. And we're just accounting now for the destruction that's been wrought on these institutions, which is again not comparable to the January 6th events. I think that one thing that I heard you mention before I logged on was the questions about financing. Again, something that Lula emphasized. Lula is going to get to the bottom of where the money is coming from for this. He pointed the finger at big agribusiness. I think it's worth investigating how these people were offered, all expense paid trips to Brasilia from where they came and why, who was financing those buses. It's always good to follow the money, as all of you on this space know. And I think that, Brazil, especially given the damage that was done specifically to Alexandre de Moraes' office, we can expect a pretty swift reaction from the Justice Ministry and from the Supreme Court in terms of looking into the sources of this. But, when we really account for the size of the group that's coming down to Brasilia, it's quite small. So I think the difference between January 6th and January 8th is going to be that the Dems in the United States tried to make January 6th into a sort of sacrosanct national holiday, a day of mourning, a day of commemoration for the democracy. And I think that the Lula government is taking a different approach, calling for a lot of caution, trying to put the thing back in the bag, not trying to make it into some great event, something that sort of is etched into the history of the country, but a bump on the road to trying to unite the country towards a more stable form of governance.
A question for you, Dave. Is it a bump in the road, or is it more serious than that? And I don't want you to dramatize it. Like, objectively speaking, how serious, or is it serious?
I personally think that if we're talking about the governance of the country, the governability of the country, which is in question here, right? I think, before we get to questions of terrorism, domestic terrorism, which are the words that are being thrown around here, I think that there are deeper problems of governability that attend to the sort of configuration, arithmetic of Congress and of the distribution of seats in places like the Senate, et cetera. I think there are deeper sources of social division that need to be healed. So I don't think that the events of today signal, that we're going to have a year of lead in Brazil necessarily. But I do think that they present a quite narrow challenge in terms of how to deliver justice in ways that seem to all sides of Brazilian society as being legitimate and fair, while ensuring that similar attacks are not tolerated. I do think it's fair to point to the fact that the way the police reacted to this incredibly violent, again, unprecedented attack on these institutions is completely different than how they reacted to other peaceful protests, where we've seen far more repression. In that sense, I think there is a similarity to the ways in which kind of police make exceptions for certain kinds of violence that are racial and class-based in some ways that I think are worth us investigating, whereas others are much more easily criminalized, incarcerated, and swiftly reacted with a much more violent and repressive mode. So I think that we still don't really know where this is and where it's going, and there's a lot more patience on behalf of the government in terms of taking their time. They have this federal push for taking over the governance, the security governance of the federal district, but I don't think we're going to see this kind of very grandiloquent approach to the events of today that immediately came in the events of January 6th. Partly because maybe they weren't in the Congress. Who knows what would have happened if people were actually populating those buildings. And
that's a very good point.
They would have felt for their lives. I think a lot of the grandiloquence of the January 6th stuff has to do with people who were thought that they were going to die at the hands of these insurrectionists, whereas that wasn't the case today. There's just a lot of physical damage. But I think that there is, spiritual damage that's going to be healed. And I think that they're not going to hesitate at all to try to mete out swift justice. And I'm sure that people listening to this will have their own opinions about whether that is a legitimate form of justice, but I certainly think it is.
And another question I have for you, David, is there a similar sentiment on the ground in Brazil? So the sentiment is that the election was stolen. Am I correct in assuming that?
Yeah, absolutely. And the sentiment is also that regardless of if it was stolen, even if it wasn't stolen, even if Lula had won, Lula is de facto, and as one of your previous speakers would claim, de jure illegitimate as a leader, and therefore the military should intervene regardless of an election outcome. There's a more pure streak of authoritarianism that transcends questions of free and fair process.
That's a valid point. But in the January 6th events, we saw a lot of people have a lot of hate towards certain politicians, in that case mainly Mike Pence. Are we seeing, I know that there was no lawmakers in the Senate at the time of these protests, but is there a similar sentiment of hate towards certain members of the Senate?
Oh, yeah. I mean, even more inflamed, and the Brazilians on this call can certainly tell you about their own forms of hatred towards various forms of PT, but the so-called anti-petismo is such a motivating libidinal force in Brazilian politics that I don't think that there would have been. I think that we could very easily imagine violence on the physical bodies of these politicians because we did just see this, right? We do have a live case of the assassination of Ms. Franco from the PSOL under Bolsonaro's presidency, in which his son is implicated criminally. I don't think that that's something that we don't have in the U.S. is the assassination of federal deputies and Congress people. So I don't think we're talking about an environment that's any more peaceful rather, or any less physically violent and homicidal than we would have seen, for example, on January 6th, which I think was more spontaneous anyway.
And Mr. Bolsonaro's in the U.S. right now in Florida, is that correct?
Correct.
Yes, in Orlando.
Okay, and why is he in the U.S.? Is he worried about prosecution in Brazil?
Yes, he's very worried about prosecution. Bolsonaro, as we now know, was participating in what is clearly understood to be the largest corruption scheme in history. Let's just put away Lava Jato. Even if you were to say there was other corruption under the PT, still the vote buying, which is raiding state coffers to purchase votes in Congress, would be in scale the largest deployment of state resources to buy votes for Bolsonaro's bills in the history of democratic Brazil, and that's just been uncovered now. So he was very scared that those kickback schemes, also raiding various social welfare programs to buy out small municipalities for votes in the presidential elections, these things are not very hard to find. The investigations were already ongoing, and I think he could be quite confident that he was going to face serious legal charges without diplomatic immunity should he stay in the country. And of course, who doesn't, which, right-wing leader doesn't love Florida. So I think that there's a certain cultural affinity of heading out to Orlando and be with his, anti-communist buddies in the state.
So I have unverified reports. Someone sent me that some Democrats, I don't want to politicize this, but I'm just going to say some lawmakers are telling Biden that they should get Bolsonaro back to Brazil and extradite him out of the US. I heard of anything like this, and again, this is unconfirmed for the audience. David, can you confirm or debunk this piece of information?
Yeah, I can confirm this. I think there's going to be increasing pressure to evict and extradite Bolsonaro from the country, which would be also unprecedented. Obviously, when it comes to extradition, that order has to originate in the country of origin, so it's not as if you can just do that. Criminally, you can't invent criminal charges and do the. It's not extradition. There has to be charges filed. But I do think that, and this gets to the crux of the conversation you guys have been having, that the perceived parallel between January 6th and January 8th is going to motivate a lot of Democrats to make this move, because their political motivation is to basically say, Trump is not just a national menace, he's a global menace, he's inspiring similar acts of terrorism around the world, and therefore I think there's a sort of partisan alignment that might drive a certain push for accountability for Bolsonaro inside the United States, which would be unheard of, right? We house all sorts of crazy international criminals who've done heinous things around the world. They love to come to the United States for centuries or whatever. At least we can talk about, what happened post-World War II, and all these Nazis love to come to the United States. So that's kind of what we are as a country. And so it would be a very interesting, novel case for them to try to mandate this kind of extradition process.
It's unlike so it's not common for the US. By the way, I just do want to give a shout out to Sphinx for, and I'll bring you up on stage in a bit, for sending me that piece of information. But is it common or uncommon for the US to extradite people like Bolsonaro?
It's very uncommon for us to extradite anti-communists from the United States. Yeah.
Okay.
We're much more likely to house them. Yeah.
Not only anti-communists, even criminals.
Loves,
really?
Yeah.
The US...
we have our homegrown
the
criminals
US
that we
like
like
to
to
extradite anybody. Yeah.
Shit.
It's very hard to
That happened
extradite
in a car wash. That happened in a car wash. When you ask for deportation, there is a treaties between the two countries, and need to follow all the steps. I mean, the crime needs to be both sides, both countries. So even when someone committed a crime in Brazil, but it's not enough to deportate someone, that person would not be deported. That happened in the car wash.
I do, David. I have a question for you. Thanks for sharing that, Alan. I have a question for you. Like my team in a group, I won't say who they are, but there's one of them that says Lula is a criminal, but Bolsonaro. I keep saying Bolsonaro. Bolsonaro is no angel. And another one says, yeah, it's a total shit show. Can you give me more context on both presidents, or president, ex-president, and why why are they calling Lula a criminal? Like, what's the what's that shady past?
Three convictions.
Yeah. Look,
actual criminal. Okay, shit.
No, okay. Hold on. Let's read the record here. So I've heard this citation now several times from one of your speakers about these 3 convictions, but that to me is reading the history backwards, not forwards. Where are we now? We're at a place where the Supreme Court has dismissed this case, has absolutely reveal the political motivations and origins of the case, of the Lava Jato corruption case. He's been, obviously not just freed from jail, but had the restrictions on his political participation also eliminated. So, the 3 convictions have been overridden. Now, you can say, I don't think you can believe in rule of law and law and order and say that I believe in one.
It wasn't overrated.
Okay, let's get into the details of the case. My point is, I don't think that anyone who's trying to make a case for someone's criminality on the basis of judicial findings can't say, I believe in one set of political judicial processes and not another. You have to say, okay, here we are talking about the judicial system that has meted out justice in these ways. Lula is not a criminal per the word. Sorry, you can have your own opinions on his record in office.
No, it's not opinion. He was convicted 3 times.
Why was he released from jail? Why was he released from prison, and why was he allowed to participate in Brazilian politics again?
That's what I said. The Supreme Court said the address was wrong. So he, instead of being, for example, how to say that in English? I'm sorry. Matthew Turman is here. He knows English better than I. But the only one thing that Supreme Court said, they said the address was wrong. So he was condemned in Curitiba, but the address should be in São Paulo. It's not opinion. Opinion is when you say, I don't believe someone is innocent or condemned. But when you have a proof and the judge say, yes, you committed this crime because this crime was committed this day at this time with this person, it's not opinion.
Great. Okay,
the Supreme Court said the address was wrong.
I hear you.
Go ahead, David.
I'm saying I'm not defensive about this because I think that all your listeners are smart enough to do their own research and investigation into what this actual case was, what the Lava Jato case is, who Sergio Moro is, why Sergio Moro also fled the country to the United States in fear of his own corrupt role in that case. People are smart enough to be able to understand what that case was and how it was resolved, and make their own decisions about about why Lula was released from prison and able to participate in politics again. What I will say, which is more relevant than the other speaker and I adjudicating details of the case, is that the perception of the PTs as a corrupt party, comes at the core of anti-pachismo, right? The idea is the PT is robbing the state, robbing the people, that they're untrustworthy managers of public resources. Now, I personally think that's completely ironic because one of the biggest, like as I said before, scandals that's rocking Brazilian politics is precisely the willingness of Jair Bolsonaro to raid the coffers of the state in service of his own political career. That is also extremely well documented, and we're going to see in the coming weeks and months how those
show me the documents.
facts on the ground.
Show me the documents.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But this is not. I'm not
well
speaking.
Documents, show me.
Sure, but
So Alan, we got your question. Go ahead, David.
No. I'll just wrap this up here. I don't think that the question is whether I'm going to present the evidence on the case here. I'm not talking about going to like thenation.com or The Guardian. We're talking about mainstream publications and mainstream research and mainstream judicial analysts looking at the facts of the case and the facts on the ground. And in the election, we had the rating of the social programs. We also have the evidence of the vote buying. These are not controversial claims. Even the Bolsonaristas will say, yeah, fuck you, I don't care. Yeah, we did that. Well, do we have to do to hold on to power? It's an election. It's just politics. There's no foul play in love and war. And that would be, I think, their perspective on this. But it always strikes me as odd when the Bolsonaristas take this judicialist approach to their politics when there's so much criminality that's driven through their side of the system, and when their own supporters say, you know what, we don't actually care that much about law and order. This isn't a question about that. This is about loyalties. This is about nation and bandera, and this is about us reclaiming this in the service of our evangelical beliefs and basically the rule of a certain set of ideas. So I don't really understand the judicialist turn on the right when Bolsonaro doesn't profess to have that much of a commitment to those same judicialist principles to begin with.
I know that Matthew also wants to kind of comment on one of the points you made, David. But before doing that, David, I've got one other question. How corrupt is Brazilian politics? Because a lot of people like to throw that word. Having covered the story, having covered Brazil for years, is it as corrupt as people make it out to be?
I think that we can talk about corruption in a lot of different ways. There is the standard form of corruption, which we saw a lot of in the Bolsonaro government, for example, which is I take money and I buy your votes, basically. Whether the votes can be at the vote buying level at the street corner, or it can be vote buying in Congress, where someone comes and buys their votes. That's one form of corruption. There's also much more institutionalized forms of corruption that we know from the United States. I mean, the United States has much more institutionalized that we wouldn't recognize as kind of criminal in the formal sense. But now, you can look at a case like, I'm not going to get the details of your world of cryptocurrency issues here, but like we can talk about other forms of more institutionalized corruption. And I think that Brazil, like any country in the region, like that, has a lot more of this institutionalized corruption, where there are ways of building out resources for specific special interests that funnel out from the state. And there's like in any country, it's leaky, and there's evidence that there's money going this way, money going that way, leaking out. Certain social programs are being misspent in those different ways. Evidence, yeah, of course, there's evidence of this.
On administration.
In all administrations, in the long history of democratic Brazil, as with all nations.
Yeah, that's true. But on Bolsonaro administration, nobody could find at least a one deposit.
That's not true. So, we can leave that there. There's no use in us arguing about this.
Okay, David.
But what I will say,
and this gets a pretty big debate. Yeah. So, David, I'll let you wrap it up. First, I want to appreciate you coming on stage, and I know that Alan and probably Matthew will have some things to disagree with. But I'll let you wrap it up. You're welcome to jump back in or stay on stage for as long as you can. But I'll let you wrap up the point you're making, and I appreciate you coming in.
No, totally. I appreciate it. I mean, what is clear in the United States, and it has global relevance, is that there's a lot of triumphalism that attends to presidential victories, right? But the struggle for these countries does not start or stop on election day. And the problem that we have in Brazil is the same problem that you might have in the United States, as in many other countries, is that it's a problem of really, really insecure majorities. People are sort of winning while losing. They're winning the election with a tiny majority in the presidential election, with a divided legislature and a deeply divided society that, in the case of Brazil, is more geographically and more class polarized than in the history of democratic Brazil. You look at the last election in 2022 and previous elections, it's more split north and south. It's more split black and white. It's more split between rich and poor than it's ever been. Those are not conditions for deep social harmony. Those are conditions for the perception of a highly zero-sum politics that motivate people to say, every penny you spend there is a penny taken out of my pocket. And you can see why. I mean, this is me in my most generous mode, trying to understand the mind of a Bolsonarista, who I do think, in the case of today's insurrection, behaved not just criminally, but violently and inexcusably. But I think that to understand where Brazilian political economy is, to understand that is really helpful to understand these deep sources of inequality and the construction of a zero-sum politics. I think that Lula, whatever, call him corrupt, doesn't matter. The pitch that Lula is making is a class compromise pitch to the country. He's going to say, look, we're going to make the country grow. A lot of that growth I'm going to redirect to the poor, but I'm not going to serve a speculative market. I'm definitely not going to serve the gringo as gringo, right? What Bolsonaro was really good at, what made him such an effective politician, is he played right on that zero-sum politics. He said, yeah, there's a war going on, and I'm on one side of that war. And I'm going to take care of my people. I'm going to take care of my communities. I'm going to take care of these people. And the rest, those communists, those dirty pachistas, all the people who were arrayed in those, what he calls the damn left, they can go fuck themselves. And I'm not going to serve that part of the country. And so that's the question is, can anyone govern in the context of such deep, profound divisions that are not just social and cultural, but are fundamentally political and economic? And I think,
Carolina.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, David.
No, I was
Carolina seems to be responding pretty briefly. Did you want to, Carolina? Do you want to respond, David? Did you want to?
So.
Oh, okay. All right, David.
We heard everything you said, and I
thanks, David. Thank you so much. Yeah, I just want to quickly thank David. David, thanks a lot, man. Carolina, please, I'd love you to give your perspective on what David said.
Well, first of all, he's wrong on a lot of what he said, but we don't have a lot of
Good start.
Yes, and I'm not going to play his game, and I'm not going to play the politics and keep people entertained here when we have to do a whole lot of damage control. We didn't have this when J6 happened here, but we do know what happened in J6, and we do know how to fix it now. And we're going to continue to help all around the world to prevent corrupt governments to do this to people. We prevented a lot of damage in Ottawa by just training people on how to not get emotionally invested, how to coordinate at the local levels, how to know who is who. Infiltration happens at every grassroots organization. So you have to make sure that you can email, text message people, that you bond together, you get to know each other so this doesn't happen. My advice to everybody before I drop out, because I have to go on another medical call and then I can come back. But my advice is to everybody in Brazil, você me liga, okay? And then I can tell you exactly how you're going to get yourself out of it, because, a year into J6, we're still trying to figure out how can we get treatment to people that are in jails, rotting, with horrible sentences, and something that has never been heard of practice in the United States, where they're being treated for misdemeanor charges and almost no charges whatsoever, or even I don't know how to say that word, but on freedom of speech. So anyways, we have a lot of work to do. I have a team of damage control that is going to help you guys, and I don't have time to be entertaining liberals or Democrats. I have work to do, but I'll be back.
Okay, Carolina, welcome back. Thank you. Good to have you. Matthew, I'd love you to respond to what David said. I think Carolina loved what he said.
Yeah, I'm with Carolina on just the...
But anything specific you could refer to, any specific points?
Yeah, many, because he basically spouted out propaganda that might as well be coming from the Washington Post editorial page, where inconvenient facts are ignored. Lula was overwhelmingly proven to be corrupt in 3 separate court hearings across, and he defrauded the entire society. So the jurisdictional debate on what court was corrupt courts were comprised predominantly of judges that he appointed in his 10 or so years, and then his successor, Dilma Rousseff, after he was impeached and pushed out of office, she appointed several more judges. This was the judicial tyranny and autocracy that took shape, where they said, no, anything we say goes because we are the arbiter of what's constitutional. So who then oversees when you have judges behaving unconstitutionally? Nobody questioned for years his corruption charges and the veracity thereof. It was overwhelmingly proven to the society. There were no mass protests saying this was a politically motivated prosecution. Everybody accepted it, just as they accepted his successor Dilma when she was caught up in the same web of public corruption, looting the public treasury, selling state assets, and she was pushed out. She was convicted and impeached. And then her successor, Michael Temer, who filled out the rest of her term before Bolsonaro was elected, appointed the lead justice, Alexander Moraes, who was infamous in Sao Paulo, where he's a prosecutor, for bending the law for his own politics and his own prosecutions. So the entire judicial autocracy that took shape was a function of their appointees, who are what sounds like David's style of ends justify the means leftists, where the facts of constitutionality be damned, because politics comes first. We're trying to create some sort of socialist utopia that benefits us, and we're part of this Politburo. Well, nobody questioned the veracity of these convictions, and the judge's actions were so gross that not only did they let Lula out of prison, but by fiat they annulled and vacated all of his sentences, because Brazil has a public corruption law that if you're convicted of a felony, you cannot stand in elections. So they just vacated all of these criminal convictions, a dozen charges, and they expunged his record by fiat so they could put him on the electoral chessboard and then engage in what we then saw in the year and a half leading in: mass censorship by fiat. Alan can talk very much about this. They not only pushed him out of the country when they raided him, they threatened him with arrest, they deplatformed him. We're seeing it now continue, freezing bank accounts, arrest warrants with no due process. This whole thing is one of the worst banana republic procedures we've ever seen, and exercise after exercise proving unconstitutionality. And yet, Adler and his fellow travelers of a Marxist bent, many of whom run the editorial rooms of the Washington Post, of the BBC, they call themselves disinformation specialists. Well, they cover up. I read Brookings. Brookings talks about how great Lula is. Doesn't even mention there was a trial. Doesn't even mention there was a conviction. So if you want to actually say that you're an honest arbiter of fact pattern that's trying to deliver the truth to the people so they can make up their own mind, don't get rid of the inconvenient facts, which are actually, if you're triaging them honestly, are the most important facts. Public corruption being the most important part of a fact pattern when somebody's running for office. Nobody in Brazil thinks Lula was honest, or Dilma was honest, or Marias is following the letter of law or the spirit of law. Nobody thinks that. Some of the leftist political cabal believe, well, the ends justify the means, so we're going to allow them to do that so that we can seize power away from the evil right and the cultural conservatives with their arcane dead concepts of things like God and higher power and universal morality. And now we see it already. We saw it when they pushed up the certification by fiat. It was supposed to be on the 19th. They moved it up to the 12th. They fined the head of Bolsonaro's party for bringing a petition to the court. Not only did they ignore the petition, but they fined his party and they told him now he's on a criminal list. All these people ending up journalists, pastors, on a assault on democracy criminal investigation list because they say the court is assaulting democracy. Well, you're not allowed in Brazil to criticize the court under this regime. They are among the most anti-democratic, Stalinist in their behavior. And then you've got the global fellow traveling left in the media rooms, the Academy, Progressive International, whatever bullshit organization this dude is a part of, running interference for them and wholesale lying. They don't want people to have the full facts, because if the people have the full facts, they will realize what the real fact pattern is, who's honest.
Matthew, I'm gonna go first. You're extremely passionate and well spoken, man. David, I'll let you respond. I know Louise disagrees with Matthew as well, so I'll let you respond just to balance it out, if you don't mind.
Yeah. Hey, quite harsh words there. I thought we were engaged in a civil discourse here.
Yeah,
but
you're putting
it's okay.
people
I'll
in
take
jail.
it.
You're advocating putting honest people in jail. I'll
right.
let Matthew. David. I'll let you respond to the points. Go ahead, David.
Respond coming to the points. No, it strikes me as ironic. I was sort of chuckling as Matthew was spitting a little sort of drivel at my face. But that it's kind of ironic that I'm accused of selecting facts, and when the whole point of this conversation we're having about justice and Brazil's justice system is that, Matthew, you liked some of the rulings that came out of Brazil's justice system, and you don't like others. Now that sounds a lot like I should be responding with a bit of to cope, but the idea is like if anyone's selecting the facts, it's a person who said, wait, no, we liked those convictions. But the rest of the justice process that was done what you call by fiat. That's called democratic process. Those are institutions working, meting out decisions that come with relevant authorities. Now, you can say, I don't believe, as a gringo, in the general institutionality of Brazil's democracy, and we should redo that architecture to deliver what I would consider to be more correct outcomes. But that's, again, you choosing the facts that would suit your political agenda. I'm just saying, let's read this thing forwards, not backwards. Your claim that talking about, again, listeners, Google, Lula, and when it talks about corruption, Again, I'm just calling for facts. Google Bolsonaro vote buying. All the newsrooms are buying. A bit rich to say that first of all, I'm enjoying this conversation, but please don't associate me with the Washington Post. Those people are, vile liberals. I don't have anything to do with them. Of course, exactly. That's the other thing. I'm like, Matthew, what is your relation to Brazil? I'm interested, but yes, I do speak Portuguese, and I do work
have
here.
Have you read the proofs and the decision of the judge?
I have, and I speak fluent Portuguese, Alan.
Do you want to respond to that, Louis?
You said I'm escaping from the justice in Brazil now. I know you know Portuguese.
You currently have an arrest warrant.
I'm not.
You
Because
currently have an
entered the
arrest
US,
warrant from the Brazilian government, and the Interpol is looking for you, as everyone should just Google and find it out. So just so we let's set the facts here, guys.
That's what the Supreme Court.
Okay,
I said that in the beginning. I said that at the beginning, Luis.
So go, yeah. So what's so guys? So Alan, do you want to tell us more about the arrest warrant, and then Louise, I know that you want to comment on that. Alan, what's the arrest warrant for? And then Louise, I'll give you the mic right after.
Yeah, I said that in the beginning. The Supreme Court Justice Alexandre de Moraes ordered my arrest and deportation, and he wasn't heard because there is no trial. My lawyers cannot access anything. This is not in a treaties between the two countries. So that's what I said in the beginning. If nobody paid attention, you need to read the treaties between the two countries when you talking about deportation. You cannot deport someone just because you want. Even Odebrecht lawyer used these case of the Brazilian treaties with the U.S. On deportation. Luis cannot disagree with me when I say the Odebrecht lawyer that Sergio Moro ordered his arrest and deportation. U.S. did not hear that. Luis, am I lying? The Odebrecht lawyer wasn't deported.
Well, you are a common liar, Alan, and that's something everyone in Brazil.
So what's the so Luis? Anything specific, Luis? Anything specific to support such a direct attack?
Okay, so specifically,
and then we'll go back to the topic of Brazil. Just to
Alan's case. His deportation.
Or maybe actually, I'll actually pivot it away. I think it's better pivot away. Do you mind, Louise? I know that this is an important topic nonetheless, but just about the points that Alan made regarding this.
That's just incorrect information. So there's a lot of incorrect. PT Workers' Party, which is the party that Lula was elected under and basically founded 35 years ago. That's incorrect.
Okay.
Yes. So that's
okay. So the point that was made is they appointed a lot of the judges, giving them a lot of influence over the judicial system, correct?
Yeah. So that point was made.
That's the allegation,
and that's just incorrect. Maybe half of the 11 Supreme Court judges were appointed by Lula or Dilma, who was his successor afterwards. And actually, some of those people. Please let me finish, Matt. Let me finish.
And I'll give you Matthew. I promise, Matthew. I'll give you the mic right after. Yes. Yeah. So Matthew, I'll give you the mic right after just to refute any points that you disagree with Louis. Go ahead, Louis.
Some of those judges voted against Lula. So if you look at the actual ruling, when they were ruling whether or not the whole trial against Lula was a fair trial, and that's what it came down to. It's not an address issue like Alan said, nothing like that. It had to do with did Lula receive a fair trial, and why did that get to the Supreme Court? It got to the Supreme Court because it was uncovered that Moro, who was the judge that judged and convicted Lula, was acting alongside with the prosecutors in hiding to convict him. So that was out there. It's out there. Like David said, you can Google, you can read all the conversation between the prosecutor and the judge. They were acting together to convict Lula. So the Supreme Court needed to rule, was this a fair trial or not? And he ended up winning 6-5. 5 of those actually were appointed. Some of those were actually appointed by him that voted against him. So this information is completely misleading. Yes, he did appoint some of those judges, correct, but some of these people actually voted against him. So that's completely misleading. He got back into the political arena because the convictions were ruled as unfair convictions. And that's all. It's not an address issue.
Okay, so before Matthew responds, I want to go to Mateus. Just give it an overview for the audience and everyone else that just joined recently. What's the latest on the ground? You and Raw's alert.
Was that sorry? Everything just cut out. So
Mario just cut out there. Matthias, we're just looking for an update on what's going on the ground. If you have anything else that's been breaking, I know you've been monitoring the entire story, especially on Twitter and such. So if you could jump in and give everybody that's new an update, that'd be awesome.
Absolutely. Yeah. For those of you just joining right now, our conversation, though important, has shifted significantly from the original breaking news story, which is, of course, the breaches of several major government buildings in Brazil following major protests that have been brewing throughout the week since current President Lula has been elected and inaugurated in Brazil. We know that there have been injuries. We know that some of the government buildings are back under some sort of control. Others are still dealing with this ongoing We know that police officers, including a very disturbing video we saw earlier of a mounted police unit assaulted, as well as the horse that he was on. Congressional police vehicles have been burned. And just over the last few hours, we're starting to see condemnation from other nations trickling in. I'm here in the U.S., so I'm specifically monitoring stuff that we've seen in the U.S. We had Secretary of State Anthony Blinken post a statement. We had the Department of State put out a statement, and now we have House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries obviously putting out a statement. The Democrats are very quick to tie this in the U.S. to the events of January 6th, which is another topic of discussion that we've been back and forth on this evening. So that's basically what we have right now. And we are aware that obviously Brazil does censor certain portions of media, social media, so we can't get a full picture, but arrests are ongoing. Tear gas continues to be deployed at this hour as they try and regain some sense of control of the situation. And we'll bring you the latest as we get it.
Awesome. Thank you. Alan or David, do you guys have any reports of protesters barricading themselves in the presidential palace and they're going head to head with the Brazilian army? That's what I'm hearing.
It's been almost dawn right now because I stopped the streaming because I saw that it's getting dark in Brazil and people are going back to the headquarters because they have a kind of camp in front of the headquarters. They feel safer over there, but there is no much protest right now.
Do you believe the situation is going to Oh yeah, go ahead, Mario.
Yeah, sorry, Nick. Is my audio good now? Because I had a quick question. Is my audio good?
Sounds great.
Yeah, cool. I dropped out, everyone. So do you mind if I go back to Mateus? And I know, Matthew, you're waiting to respond. But Mateus, did you say just in 10 seconds, because I'm the only one that dropped out, I think, is the situation on the ground easing up?
There are certain aspects. There are certain aspects of the situation that are easing up according. People have been making good points.
Okay, am I cutting out or is he cutting out?
He's cutting out.
Nick? Oh, good. Okay, I'm glad. Okay, so Matthew, David, you're cutting out. Yeah, you're cutting out, bro. But I want to go to David and Matthew on this next question. Is that how's
go back to Luis's comments?
We will. I promise we will. I promise we will. Matthew, I promise you we will. I know you didn't forget it. But I just going back to the situation on the ground now, if you don't mind, Matthew or David. How serious is this relative to other protests in Brazil over the last let's say 5 years?
This is the largest. The scale of the protests since the second round of the elections, October 30th, for 50 straight days until the certification, you had millions of people, not just in Brasilia, but in many cities occupying the city squares. I think it was the largest manifestation at least in a democratic, pseudo-democratic constitutional republic in human history, or at least since the fall of the Soviet Union. You had many, many millions of people, and the mainstream press in Brazil refused to cover it. They would even cover back alleys and say, see, there's nobody here. I saw footage of that. And then when they did cover it, later on, they started saying things like terrorists. These were peaceful, prayerful protesters. No arson. No, people came in down from the hills and started lighting a bus on fire, started burning cars that had Brazil flags, and Brazil was stolen flags, the protesters' cars. So 50 days of nothing, and then all of a sudden a false flag. And then it calmed down, and again, continued protests, nothing, no violence, nothing. And even the people who came in today, they marched in a throng of people. You could debate the merit of it, but they feel they're losing their democracy because you've got apologists like Luis who lie and tell them that it's raining when they're getting their heads being peed on. He lied right there on the judiciary. 9 out of 11 of the Supreme Court judges were appointed by Lula, Dilma, Temer. 8 by Lula and Dilma. And I will name them: Lucia Barroso, Lewandowski, Mendes, Toffoli, Fuchs, Weber, and Fachin. Fachin was the one who let Lula out of prison using a judicial technique, and it was by fiat. Temer was appointed Marias. And then Bolsonaro had 2 appointees, and the first one was in 2020, the second was in 2021. They slow-walked his ability to even put anyone on the court for the first 2 years of his presidency. So, I mean, you're not having a good faith conversation.
Are you including Temer as a Lula supporter, Matthew? Is that what you just said? Is that what you just said?
He was vice president of Dilma Rousseff. What are you talking about?
Seriously.
Temer was the vice.
So I'm just going to get everyone to speak at the same time. So David, I'll let you answer the question that I asked Matthew as well about how serious this is, because I think I saw you unmute and disagree, or maybe it was someone else. If you can comment on this point, and of course on Matthew's second point regarding the appointed judges.
Sure, and then I'll sign off, because I think that I'm kind of amazed that we appear to be reaching an almost Rorschach level of confusion about events on the ground. And again, I would encourage all of the people who are listening here not to take my word for it, certainly not to take Matthew's, but to do your own research, your own Googling, find the sources you care about, think about, who some of these characters are, who Sergio Moro is, especially who Temer is. Now that people are suggesting that Temer was a Lula ally in some significant way, which I'm chuckling at quietly and on mute. But I think I would round it out by saying the events of today, to answer your question, Mario, the events of today, it remains to be seen their significance. It's critical to remember that January 6th, 2 had a life of its own because of certain partisan motivations to turn that day into a great kind of memoriam, a great political weapon against certain people, and a great way to bolster the democratic credentials of other people. And I think that it remains to be seen how much this government has an interest in saying this was the darkest day of our democracy. The stuff that Democrats love to do in Washington. I think it remains to be seen whether it is the case. This is a country of 220 million people, so it's not clear to me that this march on Brasilia is representative in even remotely arithmetic terms. So I think that all of these events, these types of protests, depend on our matters of interpretation, our matters of how much political parties, social movements, trade unions take them, run with them, and turn them into opportunities for legend formation. And I think that it's too early to tell. What we know is that things are winding down very, very quickly. We know that things after Lula's very measured speech have become a lot calmer in Brasilia. The army's there. There's going to be, now a series of investigations, and we're going to have to see and see how it plays and see what happens to Bolsonaro as well. I mean, he hasn't spoken out yet, or as far as I know. We'll see what happens there. His buddy, who's been relieved of his duties, the head of security for federal district, has also been.
Tests?
Not that I've seen. No, he's been pretty quiet. I mean, he's been very quiet in the past weeks in general. I don't. It's unclear to me what kind of role he hopes to have in the future. I've heard rumors of potential future plans. Maybe he runs for governor of Rio or something like this. We'll see what kind of political future he wants to have. What I think I emphasize to the people who are that I speak with is that Bolsonaro is one figure, but Bolsonarismo is a political tradition that far outlives the figure. And I think that is a vision of political visions of what actually happened. If you sort of take that microcosmic example and amplify it to the whole country of Brazil, then you can see why there would be such flammable conditions in terms of how the responses might be to the events of today. Anyway, thank you for the opportunity.
Coming on stage, David. Yeah, appreciate you as well, and I see Alan dropped off as well, so I appreciate you and Alan coming on. Thanks a lot. Directly go to Phenom.
Hey guys, can you hear me?
Losing you a little, Mario.
Oh, you want me to?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for the mic. I'll make this quick, but I think that I can help us tie exactly how this is in a way tied to January 6th. And I would love to be able to message some information to Alan. Alan, please follow me, or I'd like to tag you, also Matthew as well. So if we look at what happened after Bolsonaro's kind of the rise of his popularity in Brazil and also Modi in India, you notice that Fergus Bell from the Atlantic Council, which is, a think tank for NATO, Well, they were the ones that funded through the the Global Threat of Intelligence for Facebook, and Election Watch, which is the Atlantic Council's digital forensic research lab. So they targeted Trump supporters, Bolsonaro supporters, Modi, and then previously Brexit supporters as purveyors of misinformation. And so they had public meetings with journalists, like invitation only. And so I've provided a link there in the nest through the Foundation of Freedom Online, where you can see video of these meetings. You can see video of training of journalists to call populist sentiments misinformation, and to censor even WhatsApp conversations in family groups, because they felt that the populist movement, that would be more likely to listen to family members even than what was online. So American taxpayer money, and again, all of this is documented. This is not, this is not opinion. This is coming from Mike Benz's research from the Foundation of Freedom Online, and Mike Benz worked in the State Department for a long time in their cyber department. So basically, the National Endowment for Democracy, the Defense Department, the Air Force, the Navy, all gave grants to the Atlantic Council to specifically target Bolsonaro supporters and speech that was pro-Bolsonaro. So I won't go on too far. I put this in the nest, but I think that it helps tie everything together, because, as you see, it's these think tanks that are pro-NATO that are trying to silence the populist movements.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Phenomenology. I want to go to the Brazilian report.
Yeah, go ahead, man. Go ahead.
Yes. Gustavo Ribeira is the editor-in-chief of the Brazilian report. They've had several on-the-ground reporters been putting out a lot of video content and such, and I'd love to hear their perspective on the entire situation today.
Yeah, maybe kick it off. With just an overview on the latest developments, if the situation is getting better, and then more of an overview and anything we missed on our coverage.
Hello, guys. I'm sorry if I'm going to repeat some of the stuff you have already covered. I was in.
No, it's good to recap. It's good to recap for the audience, man. It's good to recap for the audience. So go ahead.
So at this point, we have seen police charge against the mob, the angry mob that stormed the Congress, Supreme Court, and presidential palace buildings. We have seen more than 150 people who were arrested for depredation of public property, but we have not seen any reported charges by crimes such as assault or attempted murder or anything of the kind. At this point, what we have is a strong opposition between the federal government and the local administration of Brasilia, who is responsible for the police forces. And what we see is that the administration of Brasilia, despite all signs pointing to the fact that throngs of Bolsonarista supporters were heading to Brasilia to stage a big demonstration, they put just like a dozen of officers barricading, separating the protesters from the government buildings. The Solicitor General requested that the top security officer in Brasilia be arrested. And this security officer is Jair Bolsonaro's former justice minister. So what the government is saying is that this was not a glitch in the security scheme, but actually a feature of it in order to allow the demonstrators to storm the buildings and just trash them. The security officer was fired publicly by the governor of Brasilia, and Lula decreed a federal intervention in the security apparatus of the capital.
And he's in Orlando, just to add that. He's in Orlando. The security officer was actually in Orlando along with Bolsonaro right now, as we speak.
And by the way, the foreign minister just said live on television that his office will do everything it can to help extradition procedures. If the courts call for the arrest of Anderson Torres, the top security officer in Brasilia, we should expect the Brazilian federal government just doing everything it can to get this man arrested and brought back to Brazil.
So do you believe this is going to be a situation that is going to be ongoing? Is it going to be something that's going to, say, move into tomorrow, the next day? Or do you think it's going to kind of quiet down a little bit?
I would be extremely shocked if this quiets down, because ever since Bolsonaro lost the election, we have been seeing this crescendoing movement of violent acts. So after the elections were lost by the Bolsonarista camp, his supporters tried to put the country's economy in a chokehold by blocking federal highways. Then when then they camped outside of army garrisons asking for the military forces to stage a coup d'etat. When Lula's win was certified on December the 12th, they torched buses, they stormed the federal police headquarters in Brasilia, and then we had this bomb plot uncovered by police on Christmas Eve. So everything we see.
Sorry. I gotta. There's a lot more than I thought. Sorry, I interrupted you just because I want to go through them step by step. The first thing you mentioned, the coup d'état. Can you comment a bit further on this?
Yes, I mean, for the past 4 years, we have seen supporters of Jair Bolsonaro asking him to lead a military coup. After he lost the election, his supporters camped outside of army garrisons in many cities in Brazil and urged the armed forces to stage a coup d'etat, which of course didn't happen. Lula was inaugurated as president, but the Bolsonaro, even when he was president, at every time he indulged this radical fringes by never explicitly, but often implicitly saying that maybe the coup card was on his deck.
That is 100% false, by the way. Then nobody asked them to stage a coup. They asked him to invoke Article 142 according to the constitutional lines so that the military could do their job and audit an election that a lot of people had questions for. And what did the Electoral Court do in the face of that audit? They ignored it. They violated the Constitution. They broke the law in a separated powers dispute, which is what has been going on, where the judiciary basically anoints themselves monarchs, and they say nobody can check our power. Nobody can come in and question us. We can put journalists in prison. We can try and execute red notices against journalists for engaging free speech, like Alan Dos Santos, which is what they're doing. Then who's going to check them? And in the Constitution, it says the military. And they debated the invocation of Article 142, and they had all the constitutional grounds in the world to do so. Because you know the source code, that is a lawful audit that never took place because the court broke the law in obfuscating
That is not, because the
and
military,
totally ignoring it.
The military has absolutely no constitutional mandate on the electoral system. But guys, I have to leave it at this because I have another
They
interview.
have a constitutional mandate to adjudicate.
You respond to the point. That was Nick. Nick, you're using the mute everyone button now. Look at you, stepping up. So Matthew, I'll give you the mic in a bit. Just I know you were just saying bye, Brazilian Report. Just want to thank you for coming in. You've got an open invite to come back and give us an update, even though obviously some will disagree. So I want to just appreciate you for coming on, and again, open invitation. I'll send you through my number on WhatsApp as well. If you want to come on, you can just DM me. Matthew, I'll give you the mic again. Anyone that wants to follow Brazilian Report for latest updates, please do. Same for all other speakers that are giving us their time. And I know that we have Literio.eth. You lived in Brazil, came to the US. I know you want to comment on this as well. I'll give you the mic in a bit. Before that, I want to go to Matthew, because Matthew, you were speaking and you wanted to refute what Brazilian Report said. Go ahead.
In a constitutional republic, how are separated powers disputes adjudicated? In the U.S., it's very simple because the three powers have sort of equal ground. In Brazil, it doesn't work the same way. And the courts have superseded their role by unilaterally determining what law is. In America's constitutional republic, the legislature makes the laws and the judges adjudicate the constitutionality of them if there's a dispute. Here, there's been legislation from the bench. So who then can push back if that legislation is brazenly illegal, like arresting journalists, arresting congressmen like Daniel Silveira, putting people under house arrest, and there's a gross huge list of these infractions that are so at odds with any conceptual reality of what democracy is. So in the Brazilian constitution, the Article 142 says that it is the military's role to maintain the order in society, and if a separated power disputes arises, it is their role to adjudicate that, especially in the case of a judiciary who says, no, it's our role. And this is what's been happening. Nobody's been checking the judiciary. Bolsonaro didn't, the legislature didn't. So the judges continued to take more and more power and to break what democracy is by unilaterally controlling so many mechanisms within the legal system, whether it's legislating or prosecuting or sentencing. They were judge, jury, executioner of all the political enemies of the left who appointed them. They were appointed by Lula, Dilma, and Temer, and they worked on behalf of them. So the military had a constitutional role to play, and especially when there's so much debate about this election, nobody, or no, I don't say nobody, many people believe that there was fraud. They could not believe the numbers they were saying. Correlation. I wrote many articles about this at cdm.press. The statistical correlation with top of ticket versus down ballot, for instance. These things were statistically anomalies so gross that it required an audit if you were acting in good faith. Here, the military would be supposed to do this audit, and the TSC, the subsidiary court to the highly politicized Supreme Court that has the same Chief Justice, Alexander Marias, both in the Supreme Court and the subsidiary court, the Electoral Court, ignored the audit. And then when the political party brought forward a petition to also make the audit, they not only ignored the audit, they fined the party, and then they put the head of the party on a criminal investigation list. They are drunk with power. Nobody's checked them. The military's role was supposed to do that, and they faded.
Mario, can I
Luis,
please respond?
yeah, Luis, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
It's hard to follow because it's just he spits out so much stuff. So let me just focus on Article 142. When Matthew says that the military has the right, constitutional right, to adjudicate power over the other three powers, he is wrong. That is his. Let me finish, Matthew. Let me finish.
Adjudicate disputes.
Please let me.
But you're lying. You're putting words in my mouth. Just like you lied about the composition of the court. You lie.
Let me finish. So the military does not have a moderation power in Brazil. That is an interpretation some of the Bolsonaristas put on the constitution in order to justify military intervention. So that is completely incorrect. The constitution grants the three powers, just like the US, the same amount of power. One makes laws, the other one executes them, and the other one judges it. The military is the bureaucracy of the state. It sits under the executive power and follows whatever the executive power and the other powers tells them to do. So when he says that the military had the right to intervene, that is a lie. That is not true. And he's bringing these things. No, let me finish, Matthew. You speak like a madman for hours. Let me finish, okay? When he brings these things as they are facts, people listening might think, oh my God, so the military didn't do anything. But that's not a declared as legal in Brazil, is that the Supreme Court makes the last mistake. Now let's remember, Matthew, please let me, it's hard, because he keeps interrupting. Let's remember.
Yeah, let Luis speak. Yeah.
Brazil was under,
and then you can reply.
Brazil was under a military government since 1964 until 1988. Okay, this is a military government that was very harsh on the people. It tortured people. It killed people. There was a bunch of stuff going on in the country. Okay, so 1988, we get out of the military government into a democratic. We get a new constitution. Now that constitution was written by people that were elected by the people in order to write a constitution that was for all the people in Brazil, democratic. And that article he mentions was written during that period. It had nothing to do with the military. Absolutely nothing. On the contrary, the will of the people in 88 was to keep the military in check under the executive power. So by the time he raises that point, saying that the military should have used the constitutional right to intervene, what basically he's asking is for a coup d'etat. Just like everyone else in Brazil right now storming the capital, they are asking for a coup d'etat. So it's incredible when someone says that and people look at him and say, "Whoa, yeah, he might be right." No, this is 100% illegal, typical banana republic coup. That's what he's asking.
If judges break the law, if judges violate the Constitution, as the Supreme Court, as the Supreme Electoral Court, the subsidiary court, both controlled by Marias,
they can be charged by the Senate. The Senate can open a proceeding and charge the Supreme Court justice. You know that quite well, but you hide that information, and that's the problem. The Senate
very
can
clear.
open a proceeding, and then
Is
the
defrauded. The military has a role to play, and that's
no,
exactly why Article 142
no,
is
but
put
you're
in.
wrong, Matthew. The military has no role to play in mediating nothing. This is a civil matter. This is a civil matter. The military is a bureaucracy of the state. They sit under the executive power. They have no role to play. Zero. When you ask the military to play a role, you're asking for a coup. That's all.
Well, there's been a coup. It has been under the judiciary.
Yes, thank you, Mario, for having me here. And I agree 100% with Luis is saying. Matthew doesn't seem to have an idea what's going on in Brazil. Just to give people here a sense, the voting machines in Brazil are 100% audible. Before it goes into execution, every leader of each party in Brazil is invited to look into the source code and make sure that everything is okay. The military is, or you did. If you did, you would find a bunch of BS in there.
Yes, I did.
That's what you don't understand.
We were blocked out for examining the machines, and the violated law said the same thing. We need to see the machines. There's all sorts of anomalies here. You say every single party said fine. Well, no, the PL party did not say fine. Valdemar Castanado, the head of the party, filed a petition to court, and then they fined him 22 million reais and said you're assaulting democracy by filing a petition to the court.
Do you guys see a pattern here?
Well,
it's the same U.S. pattern, right? We're not there. He's questioning the machines, and then he goes back to, like people storming the cap. It's the same pattern we're seeing in Brazil repeated from something that happened in the U.S. 2 years ago. Same exact pattern.
And the military and the leader of the party liberal, they accuse the machines of doing something, and then when the Supreme Court ordered them to show proof, they did. Later on, the party apologized for making such a stand because Bolsonaro demanded the president of the party to say something.
Nobody
the president did. He backed up. So it's a bunch of empty BS that they cannot prove anything. That's the problem. The same thing
prove anything if you're being obfuscated and blocked from examining the
That's
evidence.
not true,
Which is exactly
No, everybody. The machines were open for everybody. The machines were open for everybody.
Support a lot of what Lula supporters are saying, and what the courts have even decreed, right? I think the evidence would actually weigh in their favor. However, we can always argue that the courts went too far by censoring people, by preventing these conversations from happening in the open in Brazil. And I think that's just to bring it back to the riots today, and they are riots. You can call them whatever you want. You can call it an insurrection or something, but they are riots, right? We can all argue that a lot of that was brought on by the censorship of Bolsonaro supporters.
And I wouldn't agree with that, Ian, to be honest. I think this was actually fed and nourished by Bolsonaro and his supporters, long time coming. If you hear what Bolsonaro said when he was elected 4 years ago. He said there was fraud. He himself saying that was...
I have a question, Luis. I have a question. You've made a lot of valid points. I have just one question, but he and you guys compared it. I think it was you or Matthew or David that compared it to January 6th, or you both did. Just one question is that I don't see Bolsonaro enticing the riots or the protests, whatever you want to call them, enticing his supporters to go down on the street and go to the Capitol.
In fact,
he wasn't.
It's not like with Trump, where Trump denied that he lost the election, right? Trump continues to maintain that the election was stolen, whereas Bolsonaro has actually conceded his position, right?
He never conceded formally. No, he never conceded formally.
Not formally?
Never conceded
but he hasn't ordered the military to do anything, right?
If you go on his Twitter profile, he still says President of Brazil, doesn't say ex-President of Brazil. He never conceded formally.
Oh, so it's like a soft concession, right? More like a to the public, he's like, oh yeah, I can see it, wink, wink, not,
So there are reports that he did ask the military to invoke what Matthew was saying, Article 142, and try to set up a coup. And he was set back by some of his ministers, saying there would be no international support. This is I can send you the information. I can send you the press release or the news piece that talked about that I read the other day. But that's it may be gospel or not. The truth is, he went in front of these people, that were basically in front of quarters and the military bases, and he talked to them and say, stay firm, I'm with you, never saying, you guys should be here, but basically saying, stay firm, I'm with you, we're gonna win in the end, don't worry, everything's gonna be okay. And what people were saying basically is he never really formally conceded, never also try to dismantle these people from in front of the quarters or in front of the military bases. He
I have a question for you, if you don't mind, Louise, and other speakers could take this question as well. As I was researching the January 6 events, preparing for the space that we tried to have when space glitched, one thing I heard a few people echo is that the danger. So one person that was very critical of the January 6 events in the US, he said when the protests or riots, whatever you want to call them, when they ended, he thought that was the end of it and that's it. But then later he started getting more concerned that this is actually just the beginning, and that showed a playbook. And I'm not saying I believe in this. I'm putting a point out there to discuss. It showed a playbook for other politicians on both sides of the aisle. When they lose the election, they can go through a similar process. What you're implying, and you just said yes, you're implying that this is the same playbook, and this could become a pretty dangerous precedent when you have one of the biggest, the most powerful country in the world. It didn't work for them, but they got, I'm not saying they got close either, but, and I'm assuming, I'm actually, I might sound biased, but I'm just saying that if you go down that path of thinking, that train of thought, is that possibly another example of January 6 events? And could we see that happening in other countries? We're just speculating here, but I'd love your take on it. And I'd love Matthew's take and Carolina right after you answer Louise, because I think they'll have a different take that could balance it out.
Yeah, no, I agree 100% with that, Mario. I think it's the same playbook, and I think it's being played. It's been telegraphed for a while. Bolsonaro 4 years ago was saying that the machine stole, that he was supposed to win on the first round. And he got stolen and had to go to the second round. So he's been telegraphing, he's been putting in question the electoral system for the entirety of his tenure. It's all out there. You can just Google, you can see him talking about it. I'm not making this up, okay? So yes, it is 100% the same playbook, the same pattern. You question the elections, you question the machines, then you start questioning the judiciary, and then all of a sudden you're rioting in the Capitol. It is the exact same pattern.
Carolina, I'd love you to go in because you probably give a different take on this to balance it out.
First of all, I want to ask Luis, have you looked into the Ray apps of I don't even know what country you're from, because you're sporting a Brazilian flag and a Canadian flag. So the one that sounds like it's repeating a playbook, it's you. So unless you tell me who's funding you and telling you to do this, because it's the same pattern that I see in every single one of the agitators that are sitting here spitting all sorts of lies. It is just as scripted, and it's the same. And we caught them in Canada. We caught them in all of these other countries that we hosted rallies for freedom, and I mean, we're pretty much done with you guys. We're not going to.
So would you have
wait, hold on a sec. Carolina, are you saying that the riots today were instigated by agents provocateurs and it wasn't natural?
Absolutely. It was definitely not natural.
And what evidence do you have of this claim? What evidence do you have of this claim, to say that this wasn't like a natural occurrence, that this was something that was provoked by, say, somebody on the left or somebody in the government, by a Ray Epps figure?
I just like to respond because I was silent.
So sorry, Carolina. Yeah, before you do, Louise, Carolina, did you want to respond to Ian because you're muted?
Oh, I couldn't hear Ian. What was his question?
Ian, do you want to ask a question? Can you hear him now?
Yeah. I don't know if you can still hear me, but I was wondering, what evidence do you have of this the riot today being caused by left-wingers or by the government, rather than it being a spontaneous occurrence or something that was planned by right-wing groups?
It doesn't matter how much evidence we have. We have pounds and pounds of data that pretty much prove that not only Black Lives Matter, but Antifa members were dressed as Trump supporters at the Capitol, and it didn't go anywhere. Facial recognition at the time proved that these people, who had been arrested in Utah.
There were a handful of
at least 40 of them were arrested.
There were definitely a handful of Antifa people who were at January 6th, but to claim that they were responsible for the riot,
I didn't say that Antifa here was responsible for the ones in Brazil. What I'm saying is the same playbook that Luis is repeating. I don't have time.
No, I mean, I'm talking about January 6th. I'm talking about January 6th. There is no evidence that Antifa caused it.
Yes, there is evidence,
I know that this is like a popular talking point on the right wing. And keep in mind, I am a conservative, right? I'm a conservative, but I've looked into this whole situation.
Please DM me and I'll provide you the evidence.
Okay, so let me just say
I mean,
that.
you can DM me, but they're open. I just want to know, like, because I looked into
I
it,
will give
and
it
there
to
is no
you.
evidence that that Antifa did so. There was one guy who happened to be Antifa. He was there
Not
filming the
just
whole
one
thing,
guy.
and he was arrested, and he was paid by CNN to even go there as a contributor. He was
That's
present
false.
at the
That's not
shooting
true.
of Ashley Babbitt.
That's
No,
not
that
true.
there is no
And as a
evidence
matter
that
of
he
fact, the girl,
caused any of
the
this,
girl that
though.
was with him was not his girlfriend. She was not a part of Antifa. She was just a filmmaker trying to do a documentary on the extreme polar opposites of what our country is like. Because if you know this, John Sullivan's brother, James Sullivan, was a hardcore Trump supporter, black Trump supporter that, was participating in this documentary. And the young girl had no idea. I mean, trust me, I've gone over all of this information. We've provided the data. We've given it to lots of political figures who are being suppressed, and we cannot get the word out because you know what? We're being overwhelmed with a lot of pressure from the corrupted media, and that is exactly what is happening in Brazil. You see all those corrupted media there. They're raising their hands. I don't really want to hear them because at the end of the day, they have a script, they have a narrative, and there's nothing I can do right now for them to change their mind. Their whole goal is division, and demonizing the other side. Is the 13 rules for radical is their
Isn't
playbook.
that what we're doing as well?
No, 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 no,
Isn't
no,
that what
because
both
we're
sides are
not
doing?
lying. I mean, innocent people came to the Capitol, got trampled on. Pam, who's the MAGA granny, she got trampled on, pushed into their building. We talked about this the other day, and it doesn't matter. I mean, you had Jonathan calling them a criminal. I mean, this is ridiculous. People, it was a false flag. People were, pretty much lured into there. And not only that, agitated. And all this was led by Black Lives Matter and Antifa. We provided the proof. Nobody wants to see it.
How do you know they let it though? There is no evidence that they were let there.
Come on,
If you
Ian.
look at the
Ian,
footage,
there's
this was done
Discord
by
groups.
members of
Ian,
Vanguard, right? Vanguard
Ian, I'm gonna
America,
mute.
which is a far right group. They're neo Nazis. They're the ones who started the riot, and then everybody else sort of followed suit because they had no idea what was going on. When the Capitol Police lost control of the situation, they started letting people in. But we can't rewrite the narrative and say that the Capitol Police were inviting people in all along because that isn't what happened. There was a riot outside, and when they lost control, that's when people started streaming in because they had lost control. They were like, okay, it's better to just let them in versus, fighting them.
I wanted to go to Mateus. He just dropped off to give us an update on the ground. Can anyone give us the latest update on the ground, if you don't mind? Anyone that's covering it? I think Rose alerts. Anything new that we should know?
Well,
Yeah, so it seems like everyone is clearing out now. I'm watching live footage, and there's not many protesters left. So it looks like police and everyone else is clearing everyone out.
So would you agree that this is? It seems a lot less impactful than the January 6 events. Is that a fair assessment by everyone? Does anyone disagree with this assessment comparing to
no,
January
I
6?
disagree.
Okay.
Well, it's not going to be
Why
impactful
is
because we
that?
already sent to our networks to
Let me,
de-escalate, to keep their emotions in check, and it's not going to go anywhere like it did in Ottawa.
Mario, can
We
I just
already know what
respond to
their
Carolina?
playbook.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Excited
I'd
me.
like to hear from Luis. Why do you think that this is not the same as? I mean, why do you think this is the same as January 6th? I know we had previous speakers who are opposed to the riots today who said that this is just a lightning in a bottle. That this is not going to be the same kind of situation as January 6th. Why do you think this is the same thing?
I will respond to that, Ian. But before, I just like to point out that accusing people of being funded by illegal activity.
Funded by someone. You said, who are you funded by? So
Yeah.
that kind of implies he is already funded.
Yeah.
But I know you probably don't mean it, so I just want to clarify the question.
She tries to speak
we'll
Portuguese
move on,
with an accent and ask me where I'm from. Okay, but
it's okay. So
again,
let's stop with personal attacks, guys.
Yeah.
So go back to just a question, if you don't mind, Luis. Comparing to January 6 events, you said it's as major or more major, which I found it surprising. Would love to know why you've made that statement.
I think there's two things. Number one, the U.S. took a huge stand in terms of suppressing the act after it happened, and worldwide as well. It was a huge, huge implications, and they started prosecuting people right away and searching for guilty and that kind of stuff. I think that there was not the case like Brazil, where some state governors and state police are still supporting Bolsonaro. You didn't have Trumpists like you have inside the state polices in the U.S., like you have in Brazil right now. The Bolsonaro supporters supporters have a lot of support from the state polices and also some state governors. So I think this is only the beginning of something that can get much bigger if it doesn't get suppressed right away, number one. Number two, if you guys just tune into CNN Brazil, that's live, free on YouTube, you can see what's going on right now in Brasilia live. So everyone who wants to see what's on the ground, CNN Brazil on YouTube. And there's still a lot of people on the street. They're throwing tear gas. They're throwing a bunch of stuff. These people came from all over Brazil. They got 3,000 buses, and they came from all over Brazil to protest. They're not going home now. They're going to do something else. So something else might happen unless the Brazilian government really comes down with a strong arm and makes sure that they dismantle all the people that are basically quarreling in front of military bases and things like that, and start prosecuting these people. So I think there's a risk that this could get bigger than Gen 6 for the reason that Bolsonaro has strong support under the military and under the state polices.
Yeah, but Lula has PCC and the narcos, so does that balance out?
That's just a lot.
Prodigal.
Oh my
Prodigal.
God.
Let's
No,
say
no,
let's
no,
say
no,
let's say
no.
hi. Prodigal. Let's say hi. What's up, man? It's been
Hey
a while.
Mario, how you doing? Listen, I mean,
You're about
he's
to eat
painting a very different picture. I mean, I know Brazilians on the ground. I know people who do business there, and what the Supreme Court and a lot of Brazil's institutions did during this past election is unheard of. They took journalists off Telegram, Twitter, WhatsApp. They silenced people. You had Lula's appointment to the Supreme Court, let him out on a technicality and run. I saw the videos. I saw the video of them handing out cash for votes. I saw the video of the narcos celebrating. I watched the entire election when the rest of the country managed to get their votes in, and some of the states were just as populous as the Northeast. But miraculously, once they were at 70, 80%, then the Northeast started dumping the votes. There was issues with the election machines. He actually pointed out that they weren't certified. There was issues with the numbering, etc. It was dismissed by the same Supreme Court. So to say this as if the people have been peaceful, other than today, I don't know what went into today, but let's be honest. When the guy coming in is a communist and he's saying he's going to disarm you while the PCC and the other narcos basically have de facto control over large territories of the country. Like, what are you talking about? Did the murder rate in Brazil go down when Bolsonaro lifted gun restrictions so law-abiding citizens could defend themselves against the PCC and other narcos, or did it go up?
No, come on, Mario. You can't let this happen.
You guys are all well off. You're not on the streets.
Luis,
I talk to these people I know. Like,
okay, Prodigal. Let's get Luis. Prodigal. Let's get Luis.
So Vice is not a
right. So Luis.
Can I give you?
So I just muted everyone. Prodigal.
I'm not talking about Breitbart. This is Vice. This is the Guardian.
Let's get
the narcos in Brazil are well known.
You can't just make these statements without any sort of pushback. Yeah, we
Luis.
Hear from Luis.
Yeah, Luis, I'll let you reply. So, Luis, the way the space runs is we always keep it balanced. That means we listen to all different opinions and perspectives to get a good discussion going. Because, there's people that disagree with every single speaker here, and I'd like to give everyone a voice. So, just to give you a heads up, it's the first time you come on the panel, to give you a heads up of how we run those panels. So, yeah, would love your take on this, Luis, and feel free to push back on any points. And then we'll go to
not going to entertain that level of discourse, to be honest, Mario.
Because
I respect you.
So the PCC doesn't exist?
Guys,
let Luis talk.
Luis and David, I'll let you respond, please.
Mario, I respect you. I think you do a great job with these spaces. I've been following it for a long time. I follow everything, and I think you do a great job. But that it gets to a point where I'm just not going to entertain. I think it's just I've spent a lot of time doing this. I follow Brazilian politics pretty closely. I follow everyone closely. Like, if you guys want to reach out directly to my DMs here, I can certainly have more conversations and profitable conversations about that. But that kind of discourse, I'm not going to entertain. I'm sorry, Mario, but thanks so much for having me.
What wasn't factual? Name one thing. Are you going to run like a little chicken?
Oh, that's what they do.
Luis,
They
I'll let
get
you.
into the emotional discourse and then they run away.
Guys. So, Luis, if you don't mind, and I understand exactly where you're coming from, I would appreciate personally if you could respond to the points as just a one-off, if you don't mind. Then we'll go to David.
It's tough too. Like when the guy's saying that the biggest criminal organization in Brazil is supported by Lula, the guy who was president and fought crime for so long. It's just like it gets to a point that there's nothing you can say. It gets to a point of alternate reality that it's really, really, really hard to come with any sort of rational argument against, right? So
So what you're saying is that the statement is just too broad and too difficult to
completely
either
false. It's
back
made
up or refute.
It's just completely false.
So a good response would be like, what do you have? So maybe a good response would be like, what protocol? What, just very briefly, please, protocol. What do you, for such a big statement and such any backup evidence
Yeah, I
that you
could
have
look
to
at.
back up
I
such
mean,
a
you want me
statement?
to post videos of the narcos celebrating Lula's victory, or how about the trunks of
Yeah, just the
cash
narco
in the
being
celebrating, but
prison.
that
handed out
doesn't
to
mean
voters,
You
that
or how about
default.
the
doesn't mean they
Brazilians
They
rig the
victory
vote,
glorify the
that
right?
they put?
narc.
Yeah, like the narcos. I mean, them celebrating. Yeah, they probably wanted him to win because it means that they're going to cut down on a lot of the laws that Bolsonaro put in place. But I mean, we can't exactly infer that they were responsible for rigging the vote,
They
right? I mean,
control the regions where Lula has the
I
heaviest
will
support.
go.
Let's be honest.
I'll go. Protocol. It's been a
correlation is
while.
not equal causation. Is all I'm saying.
He's
I mean,
not. He's
we
not
need
just going to go
actual
easy on the
evidence of all
narcos.
David,
He's
these
taking
things.
away
David,
guns from law-abiding Brazilians, right? This is not
David,
just
did you want
one
to
thing.
respond, please?
Yes.
David, go ahead, please.
Hey, Mari, I'm just going to give you some news from the ground since I'm in
Yeah,
Brazil.
that's actually good. And by the way, just before you do, actually, I'm going to go to Jim for one reason, David. Your mic is a bit echoey, so I'll get Jim to speak a bit before giving you the mic again to give us an update from the ground. And just when you fix the echo on your mic, if you don't mind, Jim, the mic is yours. And by the way, I know that Literio's been waiting for a while, so I'll give him the mic as well to give us his. Got a pretty interesting story, Literio. But I'll go to Jim first. Go ahead, Jim.
Me too.
Yeah, Luis, if we pull away just a little bit from from the narrative or the discussion that you've been having, Lula aside for just a second, do you not see a way in which the shutdown, the complete shutdown in the media, on social media, and everywhere else from Bolsonaro supporters wanting to express their concerns about what just happened in this election? I mean, do you not see that as something that would contribute to the frustration of people who were supporting Bolsonaro so strongly? Does that not bother you even?
Yeah, so Luis, I'll go to you, Luis, on this question before going to David. It's actually, I like this question, Luis, because we talked a lot about censorship here, and censorship tends to fuel, without going liberal or conservative, in general, censorship tends to fuel animosity among a certain group. Would you say that might have contributed, Luis?
Look, I think there's a much deeper point here, and this has to do with other spaces you've done as well. Is what is censorship when it comes down to is it a judicial request to shut down someone because they're inciting violence? Censorship, and I'm asking that broadly. I'm not implying anything. Okay, is asking someone to be deplatformed because they're inciting a coup in a country? Censorship. So that's the question I'm asking. I think that's really what it comes down to. This whole
But Luis, let me interrupt just a second, Luis, because I get all that, and there are things. I mean, some of that I think goes way out of the bounds of the general principles of freedom of speech. But there are some issues that come up when there's acute direct violence. But that's not the problem here. The problem here is that broadly, whether it was the judiciary or anyone else, and social media companies working with it and media companies working with it, there was a broad shutdown of any discussion all over Brazil about what happened in this election. That's totally different than what you're talking about, and that's what I'm asking you to address. I find that to be a
That's where
significant
I'm on
part
as
of this whole
well.
thing.
Like I don't think there's this massive conspiracy on side of left or the right, but we cannot deny that there was this broad shutdown of journalism, a broad shutdown of free speech. You can't talk about these issues. You can't contest the election if you're in Brazil on
And it
social
only
media, right? If
affected
you're on Facebook, they
Bolsonaro's
literally
not
ban
party,
you.
true,
right?
Ian. But that's not true.
So Luis,
That is
Luis,
incorrect.
That's not true.
go ahead,
That's
Luis.
not true.
That's not
That's
true.
Yeah, Luis and David, go ahead, guys.
So
And then
there's a Brazil has a whole TV channel dedicated called Jovem Pan that is on air right now. You can tune in, and it's 100% dedicated to Bolsonaro supporters and his claims. 100%. It's open air. So
and it's been heavily censored on YouTube.
Okay, look.
Yeah,
Heavily
they have
censored.
the control of the social media platform. So,
let me
locally, you can kind of talk about it, but
Heavily
if you're
censored.
on
Go
social
ahead,
media,
guys.
on
Go
Telegram,
ahead.
a Brazilian journalist was censored on Telegram, and this was even against the decision of the person who runs Telegram.
Yeah.
He had to reverse. He tried to reverse the censorship, and then he literally was threatened with deplatforming. The Brazilian Supreme Court said that we would shut down your application and ban every Brazilian from even using it would be illegal to run Telegram in Brazil, and forcing him to actually enact a censorship on this journalist. I mean, I don't think we can deny this because this is exactly what happened.
But what happened, Luis? Let me just finish, okay? There has been, yes, in some cases where journalists or people like Alan's not even a journalist, but per se, like he's here saying he's a journalist. He's not even a journalist per se. He's a person that calls himself journalist. He's not graduating in journalism.
I guess I'm not a journalist either.
But with that said, there has been cases where the judicial power has issued requests for Telegram and other platforms to take these people out. In the majority of those cases is because they either incited for violence or broke the law.
Yeah, is that why they didn't let them reference Lula as an ex-convict?
I mean,
guys, let's skip it. There's a lot of people jumping in. Let's just put hand up. Let's
They fined them $19,000 an hour if they didn't take it down.
Prodigal,
the fine was $19,000 an hour. What are you talking about? I mean, you're from Brazil. I'm not. You should know this better than me. Were they allowed to refer to Lula as an ex-convict?
Can we get David to keep talking? I just want to hear from him more.
I love Prodigal. David, go ahead.
Hey, Luis, I just want to.
Matthew, I'll let you go. I know you've been waiting for it. And then we'll go to David.
Matthew,
David, sorry.
You can rebut what David just
said. Is the microphone better now?
It is, yeah. I'll give you the mic. I'll give you the mic right after Matthew. Go ahead, Matthew, and then David.
The censorship has been going on grossly for more than 2 years. Journalists have been deplatformed. Now they've gone on and debanked. They have frozen the bank accounts of Paulo Figueiredo from Jovem Pan, Rodrigo Constantino, an economist with 2 million followers on Twitter, 2 million on Instagram, a very successful YouTube podcast series. Started off as an economist. He got into politics because there is no economy with the level that politics has gone in Brazil with this judicial autocracy. There's no democracy when a bunch of political appointees from one side can pick and choose who gets a voice and who doesn't. I'm old enough to remember when Carmen Lucia, one of the Lula-appointed Supreme Court justices, tried to criminally go after Bolsonaro because he blocked some trolls from his Twitter and said, you're not allowed to do that. Your Twitter, your private Twitter is a public space. But at the same time, they were then taking Carla Zambelli, an elected senator, her entire voice away and deplatforming her. So, I mean, the hypocrisy is rife. Luis chooses to pick and choose facts and ignore the facts.
Hallelujah.
Deputy. A member of the Chamber of Deputies. Bia Kicis, Carla Zambelli, Gustavo Geyer, Nicholas Ferreira. These are elected members of the supposedly Brazil's democracy, and they're
not above the law. They're not above the law.
So let me ask you. Let me ask you just to be clear.
David, go ahead.
The law is.
Yes, so David, you're just responding.
And I'd like to hear from Buddha as well because
I agree. So I'll give it.
She appears to disagree with Matthew. So let's go to Buddha first because we haven't heard from her.
Thank you, guys. And I'm sorry, I don't want to be mean here, but first, I think this space at the moment, Mario, is still with a very much young gringo North view, right? Not understanding of what is really the Brazilian reality, okay? And also the Brazilian laws, because there is essential things like starting with the freedom of speech, for example, right? It's one thing that Americans do not understand, that in Brazil, for example, hate speech is a crime. So you are not allowed to commit
Do you consider the Bible a hate book?
Excuse me, are you cutting me? Excuse me, are you cutting me?
Go ahead.
I've been here for hours.
Should they take down the statue of Jesus?
Prodigal.
Excuse me.
Prodigal, please, man. Go ahead,
Thank
Victor.
you
Go ahead.
very much. I've been waiting for hours and didn't cut anybody.
Yeah, I understand. No, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Agree. Please
right?
go ahead.
But what I wanted to say is that you guys are talking about Lula and the narco and all that. The narco is a problem in the whole Latin America. And if you're going to look into the other side, most of those evangelical churches are also involved with the narcos. Okay? So it's not a privilege of any side. Right? Corruption is not a privilege of any side in Latin America. There are pillars that sustain this system in the whole region, and are the oligarchies, the religion, the narco, and I can continue with that. Corruption, okay?
Communists.
excuse me, who is talking about communists nowadays?
Well, you said the groups. You left one out. I figured I'd throw it in.
No. I'm not naming groups. Okay, you are, right? And I think it's really very narrow to read at this situation like this. But the bottom line is, right, the Brazilian Supreme Court is independent. The Brazilian Supreme Court has, for the last 4 years, maintained at only God knows how, right, the rule of law in the country, right, as you like it or not. And yes, they had to go and make decisions and take steps that were on the board of constitutionality and being questioned, because what is been happening in the country was criminal. Okay, that's the whole thing. They were guaranteeing the Brazilian society, the Brazilian democracy, and nobody here is really speaking and being reflective of the
No,
Brazilian
I agree.
society.
They
I would
protected
like to
democracy by
ask
silencing
Mario,
journalists and opposition
Let her
Mario,
politicians.
I
speak,
would like
please.
to
Let
ask
her
you,
speak.
if you can, to bring up here Isupério, who is brilliant, and he is, yes, he can represent Brazil. He can speak for a lot of Brazilian people, not even me, a white privileged woman. Okay, so
Sure. So if you can send me through, if you could DM me his handle, please, Guta, and I'll bring him up. And I appreciate you waiting patiently, sharing your
thank you.
perspective. David, I know you've been waiting. Thank you.
Mario, I'm
David,
gonna
you've been
drop.
waiting for
Okay,
a
I
while,
have
and
to
now we'll
go,
go.
but thanks.
Yes. Matthew, thanks a lot, man. Appreciate you coming on. David, I'll let you add on to this, and then I know Arndt will disagree with Guta. So I'll let you go first, David.
Okay. Yes, I partially agree with Guta. Everything that has been said here about silencing journalists, silencing deputies and senators, because they all broke the law. I mean, if you don't agree with the law, then Brazil has democratic, bureaucratic steps that you can change the law. But the laws that we have, whether you like them or not, they have been deployed and executed. Nothing that the Supreme Court did was an overstep of whatsoever or whatever in the Constitution. But, I'm here to give you some news from the ground. 210 people have already been arrested. The government of Brasilia have stopped over 100 buses that took all these people into the city for this terrorist act. So they can't leave the city. The person responsible for the security of the city that is under the governor has been fired and sentenced. So he's already been responsible for whatever happened in Brasilia. And I don't know if you guys know this, but he's actually right now in Orlando hanging out with Bolsonaro. So if you connect the dots, this all seems quite intriguing that, why is he hanging out with Bolsonaro?
David, sorry to interrupt you. Who's in the chief police officer of the capital, or did I misunderstand this? Who's right now involved with Bolsonaro? That was, where you said we're connecting the dots?
Yes, his name is Anderson Torres. He's not a police officer or
what's
anything.
his position?
He works for, let me bring it up here real quick. He works under the governor of Brasilia. He's a secretary
Chief of
public.
police of the federal police. So he's a current chief of police of the federal police?
No, he's a secretary of public safety of the federal district, which is Brasilia. He's the one that, delivers orders to the police in Brasilia. He's just not there. He left to go to Orlando to hang out with Bolsonaro right now. There is already an order.
So just to confirm, and I'm not implying anything, but what you're saying is that the person responsible for the security in the capital is currently, so he's being blamed by the government or by some officials in the government for what's happening, but he's currently with Bolsonaro in the US?
Yes.
And he was appointed, Mario. I'm guessing he was appointed by Bolsonaro, so he's obviously a supporter of Bolsonaro?
No, he's not responsible for the security of the capital. He's responsible for the security of the city of Brasilia, which is a federal district.
Okay.
He was appointed by the governor of Brasilia.
Okay, and he is a supporter of Bolsonaro.
Yeah, that's
Both
why
Bolsonaro,
of
he's
or
them,
in
the governor
Yes,
Orlando. Yeah.
Brazilian and
okay,
the
yes.
appointee for the
He used
security.
to be.
okay.
Yeah,
I'll
he
go
used to
to
work for Bolsonaro.
I'll go to Arndt just to kind of balance out the discussion because I know you disagree with some of the points made before I finally go to Literio for his story. Arndt, go ahead, man.
Hey guys, hey Mario, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to be sharing my thoughts with you guys. Uh, First of all, I just want to make sure y'all understand you're not in Brazil, and it's really hard. I'm always between Austin, Texas, and Brazil, family members, and I could actually see what is happening in Brazil when you are in Brazil and you see the amount of people voting and just trying to get Bolsonaro elected, and you see the amount of people going for Lula is just unbelievable. And when you see the vote machine saying you have like, 52% of votes going to Lula, and you don't see anybody celebrating in the streets, is just weird. And as a result, we have the Brazilian economy just collapsing right now, and we are just seeing all the numbers going down. I mean, it's ridiculous what is happening in Brazil, and I get
But would you,
surprised.
quick question, do you mind if I ask you a quick question? A quick question. Do you think like the economy collapsing, I think you implied blaming it on Lula. Is it better to blame it on just the the divide right now in Brazil and the instability in the country versus a
No.
certain politician? Okay.
Well, basically, the only reason why I'm blaming Lula is just because what he's doing into the market. He actually told on the TV that he's against the entrepreneur, that he's against the people, the market. He wants to protect their state.
He's
That's
a
what they want.
more avowed communist. He started the Forum Sao Paulo in 1990 with Fidel Castro to take over when the Soviet Union fell, for instilling Marxism all over South America, and then was the total model for Chavismo, Maduro,
Exactly.
Chavez,
Yeah, I
Morales,
agree, Matthew here.
Kirchner, Fernandez. All of
Yeah.
them were incubated by Lula, a Marxist. Of course the market's going to collapse. Operation Car Wash, Petrobras, oil going out the back door for cash in bags and going to support the Cuban economy for free. Come on.
The
That's why
privat, the
Lula
privat,
was the
listen,
candidate of
I'll
the market,
let
right?
Gutta, yeah,
Because
reply.
if I
the
recall,
What about
the
privatization.
Canada the
American
market?
Guys. I'll just
Global.
I'm just gonna just to balance it out. By the way, Matthew, good to have you back. You wanted to
Yeah, it's
comment on
good to
this
have you.
point?
But Matthew, it
Go ahead, Ian.
wasn't real socialism though.
Oh yeah, no, they didn't kill enough people with gulags. They won't make that mistake twice.
Good.
And now,
Gutta,
Oh yeah.
Aren't, do you mind if I get Gutta just to balance it out, Aren't? Because you, Matthew, kind of made a certain point. Just to balance out the discussion, Gutta, I'd love you to respond briefly before Aren't
Thank you,
continues.
Mario. No, it's just a brief information that actually the candidate that was supported by the market in Brazil
Did I
was
drop out,
Lula.
or did Gutta drop out? Please be Gutta.
Lula was the
No, you just
candidate
can't
of the
hear.
market. Just so you.
Well, what do you mean the market? There's an ivory tower concept
He wasn't the
that are
candidate
He
of the
that
was
market.
are,
Brazil
that are
started
created
very,
by
the
very,
Globo
banking.
very
and the
early.
ivory tower.
Yeah.
Guta, go ahead, keep going.
Yeah, Matthew, I would like to hear Matthew respond to what Gouda is saying.
I just want to finish, guys, if you guys let me.
Sure, go ahead,
Yeah.
Arn.
Okay. So just to finish my point here, and then you guys can continue. But the thing is, one of the things let's get back a little bit and see why Lula was one of the candidates, because the Supreme Court got corrupted and took Lula out of the jail because he was the only one that they thought could compete against Bolsonaro. Okay, so that's just to start off. That's important to mention here. Okay, the whole Lula election was a fake stuff. Was something that they made up, and they put Lula to compete and take Bolsonaro away. That goes with the Foro de São Paulo thing that Lula started, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and then they are trying to set up right now in Latin America.
Foro de São Paulo was
So,
established by Fernando Henrique Cardoso, by the way, not by Lula. Okay,
Yeah,
and
I'm
after
not saying
that,
I'm
you had
not saying
Foro of
Guta,
the
let me finish,
Maranhão.
please. You had your turn, so let me finish, please.
And she's
So
lying.
yeah, I know. I know that's right.
1990. Lula admits it. Yes, you're lying. You
So
could read Lula's own
What about
statements in the
if
mid
you say
2000s
that I
when
may
he
be
hosted
wrong,
them.
but calling
Yeah, be
somebody a
careful. The
liar,
Brazilian
isn't that
Supreme
a
Court
bit
might
too
censor you.
much?
Yeah, exactly. No, you're lying. Lula
Let's go to Matthew. Let Matthew go first. Yeah.
Lula has said it himself. Read his addresses at Forum Sao Paulo conclaves in Brazil and other places in South America, where he talks proudly about how in 2005 or 6 there was one of these speeches. 15 years ago, I created with Fidel Castro this great forum to inculcate our Workers of the World Unite schema all across Latin America. They're already talking about creating a South American superstate with one currency, as
Don't
if the
forget
Brazilian
BRICS.
economy should converge on the Venezuelan economy. Monica Valenti, the secretary for Forum Sao Paulo in Brazil, said as head of his transition a few weeks after this quote-unquote election on October 30th, that we need to defend Brazilian democracy like Maduro's hard-fought democracy. That's a quote. They believe Chavismo delivers their sort of democracy. And in some level, it's right. It's a democracy, not a republic. Why they eviscerate the Constitution? Their democracy is we will create mob rule. We will take from some, give to others, create a mob, and get our 50.1% and always control. Maduro, Chavez, what they created there was a feature, not a bug. That is their form of democracy. That's what they want to go in Brazil. That's what they're building with their fellow travelers at Globo and Folha and in the Ivory Tower. And it sounds like you're a big part of it. I mean, you're quote tweeting Marias, who is one of the worst human beings in modern history, who should be in The Hague right now. And you're quote tweeting him like he's a hero. He took people's voices. He put congressmen in jail. He put journalists in jail. He's trying to get Alan dos Santos red notice for exercising his free speech. He believes in God. He's got a God-given right to assemble, to speak his mind. And anyone who does it in antithesis to what you're pushing, you say this is an assault on democratic institutions. You say when the court imprisons people and people criticize that, that's the assault on democracy. We're going to arrest them. You're all for that. That is why people rioted. That's why people are fighting, and they want their democracy and their republic back under a constitution, not under a fiat of a bunch of corrupted people who looted the country and then said, hey, but we gave you something with Bolsa Familia. Bullshit.
Yeah, I just
David,
want to
you
jump in
had a
on
response.
one thing, if possible, because she's incorrect. Brazil started their monetary tightening earlier than most countries, right? The two countries that were best prepared or in position to weather the global downturn were Israel and Brazil. We'll see what her hero Lula does as the narcos are empowered, the spending goes out of control, and law-abiding business people and farmers realize that the system's rigged and don't work. Like, we'll see what happens to Brazil. The market was prepared for Brazil to do well over the next year and a half. We'll see how it does.
And it's one thing is important to mention here. People are just saying Bolsonaro. Let's just keep in mind, Bolsonaro has nothing to do with the protests we are right now having in Brazil. People are going there because they don't. No. Hold on.
But they said that he's controlling it from Epcot Center.
Come on.
Yeah, he's riding the teacups right now.
Yeah, that's a BS.
Just to say one thing. Alan dos Santos is a criminal.
So I'm back. My mic is working, and I can hear you guys. So David, I'll let you respond because there's just it's a bit imbalanced in some ways. I'll let you respond to the points made so far, David, and then we'll go to Gutta and then back to Matthew. David, you got to unmute. Gutta, I'll let you.
No,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say that Alan dos Santos is a criminal. He ran away from Brazil. He's being prosecuted, ruled guilty. So you're acting like Alan dos Santos is a hero. I don't know where you're getting your facts from.
He is a hero.
He's not a criminal. Are you crazy?
The only laws
he
broke
is a criminal.
was
He has went through a trial. He was found guilty.
Well,
what are you talking about?
He was put under trial because the corrupt judicial system we have in Brazil.
Come on!
Yes.
You cannot play that BS.
What he has done.
To these people, it's criminal to criticize the court. The court sentences you criticize them, then you're a criminal.
True.
That is the blanket 800 arrest
He
warrants
was running the Diesel militia for so long. He broke so many laws.
No,
he needs to go back to Brazil and go to jail. He has some payments to do. No, free
No,
speech
no,
in
no,
Brazil
no.
is not the First
You're a
Amendment.
thug.
You
You're a
got your facts
Stalinist.
wrong.
If you believe that, you are a Stalinist because he spoke his
Oh
mind,
my
and
goodness.
God gives you the right to speak your mind, and you people want to take that away from the free people, which is why Brazil will be Venezuela under your
No,
regime.
you
And
need to
that's why the people
understand
are
that
marching.
Brazil has its own laws about freedom of speech.
No,
You
sir.
cannot just come
No,
to the
sir.
country and
You're
make sure
wrong.
that everything you say
You're
will
wrong,
go
sir.
under the scrutiny of the law.
Just Google it. Just
He
Google it.
broke so many
Brazilian
laws.
law for free speech.
He
Just
was
Google it.
running the digital militias. He had an online militia that ran so many misinformation campaigns in the country of defamation,
Online militia. Look at the
attack,
terminology you people
and
are throwing around,
also
you Stalinist thugs.
attacking people with false claims.
Oh,
He was
false
brought
claims.
to
Oh my God.
trial
He
and he was
said mean
found
things about
guilty. He
Lula.
needs to
Lula's a
go back.
criminal.
We'll go quickly to just an update from the ground, if you don't mind. Rolls alerts. Anything new on the ground? Is it still de-escalating? Any developments? Because we did hear one of the panelists earlier say that he expects it to continue going on for a while. And right after you give us the update, I do want to go to Literio, who's been waiting for probably 2 hours
So
now.
I just got. So sorry. So the governor of Brazil is reporting at least 400 protesters have been arrested. So.
And how many? Does anyone know how many got arrested on January 6th in the US?
On the day, not that many. I mean, there's a few dozen maybe, but it wasn't as big as that.
Oh wow, 400. Okay, it's a lot more. And how many?
Is there any truth to the rumors?
Before we go to the rumors, Rosalert, do we know how many people were on the ground in this protest riot, whatever you want to call it, versus the one on January 6th?
Gosh, I think the Brazil is much larger than the January 6th that I can tell, but it's hard to tell at this
If you can,
moment.
if
There's roughly only a few hundred people at J6, and that was bolstered later on when the people from Trump's march went there and walked into the Capitol after the police had basically given up. And a lot of the people there, I would argue that they had no idea they were quote unquote trespassing, right? Because they were basically just let in. So, there are two groups of different people in J6. There's the thousands who simply walked in, who were very peaceful, and then there's a few hundreds who were causing violence at the start.
And before we go to Literio, I just want to say for anyone requesting to speak, because I see a lot of great names requesting to speak, please DM me on why you want to speak, and then the team will bring you up. Literio, you've been waiting for a while. You want to share your experience and then your thoughts on what's happening on the ground in Brazil.
Hey Mario, thank you.
Man, your mic is really bad. I'll go to Guta because she has her hands up, and Literio, I know you waited for 2 hours, man, but your mic was really bad. Go ahead, Guta.
Thank you again, Mario, for the space. I just wanted to say something that may surprise everybody, because I want to. I think I'm the only Brazilian here on stage at the moment, or Arnold is as well Brazilian.
I'm also from Brazil.
Yeah.
We can get Aldo Santos back if
No,
you want.
thank
I'll
you.
text
I
him.
wouldn't like to divide this space with him. But what I wanted to say is that what I'm saying, it's my personal position as a Brazilian, okay? And I did not vote for Lula, and I did not vote for Bolsonaro. All right? Just wanted to leave that very clear to all of you. If you're thinking that I'm Lula, I'm not. I'm Brazilian for Brazil.
And I want to ask a question to other panelists, because I did ask it to panelists previously. You can kick it off, Guta, and then we'll go to Matthew. Very briefly, how corrupt is Brazil in your opinion? And I don't mean it in a derogatory way. Like how serious is corruption in Brazil? And by the way, I Superior's here, so I'm bringing him up as a speaker, by the way, based on your recommendation, Guta. Do you want to answer that one, Guta, while waiting for Mr. Superior to come up?
Okay.
Oh, he's up. He's up.
So,
yeah, so do you want to answer the question, Guta?
yes, it is serious a problem. That's what I said. It's one of the pillars of the situation that the country is. Why Brazil is a so socially unfair society. Corruption is part of all that from the beginning of the country, right? Brazil, it's developed its elite and government and everything that sustained power from the time of the Portuguese, from the time of the courts, right? If you go to the Brazilian Congress and what they call the big center, half or more than half of the people there are still from families who ruled the country on the 18th and 19th centuries, right? And this is the problem. You want everything has to be new, has to be changed. People have to take Brazil. When you saw Raoni going up on the palace with the other representation of the Brazilian people, this is Brazil. Those people who gave Lula the the badge, now I forgot the name in English, right? This was very, very symbolic and very important. That moment was fantastic. And that's what Brazil is about. It's about these people. It's not about people like me or any of us. It's about people like them. And Brazil belongs to them.
They
E
tried that
Superior.
in Rhodesia. How did it work out?
I want to give E Superior the mic. Just brought him up based on Guta's recommendation. E Superior, how are you? I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right.
I'm good. How about you guys?
Yeah, good man, good. What's your thoughts on what's going on the streets?
What's going on in the street is exactly what we have seen here. Just white people talking about things that they have no idea. And white people from the left and from the right, they are all the same. So the basis of the situation of Brazil is the racism. If we still having just white people that have no knowledge about the reality that happened in Brazil speaking on the microphone, we always going to have the same situation that we just have right now, that white people was invading the parliament with no barriers, and police was not treating them with the brutality that they used to
So
treat
how
black
did
people in
this
Brazil.
how did this become is that a common debate that you guys are having? That
All
this is a discussion
communists are
of race?
racist. Yeah.
Brazil
Now
is
let's
majority made from black people, black and brown people. We are more than a half black and brown people. So if you are talking about Brazil, and
Black and brown people are two different groups, though.
if you do not have black and brown people talking about the Brazil, it's because you have no idea what happened in Brazil. All those right people that is here,
But Brazil
they
has
are
always
But I know
been
from
you got
white,
rid of
though. What are you
they are
slavery
talking
later than
about?
from
the
they
U.S.
Brazil,
Did that happen?
Brazil's leadership, just from like history, was, you can't say it's all black and brown people. That's not what Brazil is. I mean, you're ignoring history completely. I'm sure
No,
Matthew
Lula's
has a
white
lot to say
enough.
on
Don't
this as
worry.
well.
I mean, where are you? Where's the talk about the indigenous people? Where's the talk about Chief Sereri, who right now is being tortured and compelled to write an apology letter to Marias in the greatest example of Stalinist communism comes to Brazil in the modern era? Your framework on race, I mean, not surprising from a guy who defines himself as he/him vegan, is a joke and a half. There were black and brown people all over all the grounds of Brasilia today. There were black and brown people all over the grounds protesting for 75 days with no violence. Brazil is a multiracial society and successful on racial bases based on that until somebody like you, he/him vegan, comes in and then tries to sow discontent to instill Marxism and divide and conquer to create a mob. You're a joke.
is that
I
what
like this Matthew
what
guy.
you
I
guys
like
have seen here, because my microphone was muted, is exactly what is happening
Good.
in Brazil. White people always getting the microphone and have no idea what's happening in the reality,
Alan,
and
not
have
that
but
white.
you
race
no
is
have
not
I
I
Brazil.
want
have
to
to
go
Not
talk.
white.
You
I just
guys
want to
are
remind
cutting
everybody
me.
that I'm
guys.
not
You
white.
guys are
Oh,
you
guys, yeah,
guys are
go ahead,
cutting me.
Eastbury. Go ahead,
So I
guys.
have to
I'll let you
finish.
finish your point.
So
Yeah,
it
I'll let you finish your point. I just want to, can I point out one quick thing and I'll let you continue, I promise. Just like you have the mic and you're not white. So maybe you mean, maybe you're referring to racism in Brazil, not on the mic here. Just want to be clear. But I'll let you make your point so others can
there's
respond because
no
that's new to
difference.
me as
There's
it
no
is.
difference, my dear.
God.
Okay, so
What?
continue. It's okay. It's okay. Let's. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'll let you finish, Isabel. I think your name is Matthew. Is it Matthew?
Matt, yeah, Matthew.
Yeah,
I
Matt.
mean,
Yeah. No,
again,
sorry. No, sorry. Not Matthew. Sorry. Your name is David. Isabel, your name is David. Yeah, sorry. Sorry, I didn't mean you, Matthew. My bad. David, I'll let you finish your point, and then we'll go to Matthew and Arndt to respond. Do you want to finish your point, David? David, you're muted. Superior, you're muted.
Yeah, you
Superior.
said David, so I was waiting. So what is happening
Oh,
in
okay. Yeah,
Brazil is
go ahead.
exactly what is happening here. I was trying to say the perspective of the majority of the people in Brazil, and white people could not hear because they don't get responsibility to be daughters and nephews of the slavers in Brazil, and they get no responsibility for everything that happened in Brazil. So that's exactly what happened. And they muted me, and you guys started to cut at me, and I would not be able to express my
No,
opinion.
so we
That's what
so
is
what
happened.
happens? No, so yeah, so David,
We didn't
we
mute you.
didn't
We
mute.
muted
Yeah, I'll
everyone.
explain. Yeah, I'll explain, Ian. So what we did, David, is we muted everyone whenever people interrupt a lot, and we just pressed the mute everyone button just to bring it back to get so the audience can listen. And then I gave you the mic right afterwards. So it didn't mean any disrespect there. I just did mute everyone.
Listen,
But we'll
Mario,
go
just
to
say you're the Supreme Court of this space. You can mute whatever you want.
prodigal. Guys, so Matthew, I'll let you respond, and I know you heavily disagree with David's point, but I'll let you respond. Like, where is that sentiment coming from, Matthew? Trying to put yourself in his shoes as much as you can, if you don't mind.
Well, I think the sentiment on the ground has been from a society that is scared of losing their voice and their God-given freedoms. You know, Bolsonaro did not concede when, right after the second round, he said distinctly, you do what you feel is right, adherent to the Constitution. If you have a right to assemble, make your voices heard. He never called for violence. He emphasized peacefully. And by the way, these people were very peaceful. No arson, no violence, not until this December 12th when they pushed up the certification illegally a week up because they knew that there was some pressures coming from the institutions because a lot of people are scared about what's going down in Brazil among the entire strata of society. I love how Isuperio comes in and makes it about identity politics. There's no debate about identity politics. Even the Lula stronghold previously, the leftist stronghold in the Amazon among the indigenous peoples and the tribe, the Javanchi tribe, the other dozen or so tribes, that they saw that their ballots were not counted, that in their precincts there were 0 votes for Bolsonaro, and they said no. That's fraud. They started marching. And right now you've got one of the leaders of the protest movement, totally organically driven. This sprung up by anger from the people because they saw fraud. And if they even said the word fraud, Marias would have them arrested or have their bank accounts frozen or have them put under house arrest or have them their social media deplatformed. So where's Isuperio on, if you want to make it about race, talk about the indigenous peoples, how they've been disenfranchised.
I'm going to talk about whatever I
UN.
want. I'm not going to talk about whatever you want, white trash.
Because I'm just a stupid white person.
Oh, there's not okay. This getting David. I brought you up on stage, but it's getting a bit too much about race, David. Like, did you just call him white trash? Sorry, David. Did you just call him white trash?
That was Isuperio. He needs to have a stake.
Yeah. So Isuperio, that's just a warning.
We're not gonna have racism on here.
Yeah.
Anti-white racism.
I've given you
despite what some people are saying.
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
you can't be
Isuperio
racist against white people. Of course you can be. You can be racist against anyone.
No, you don't understand. The left,
guys.
To
Just to go back, I do want to go back to Carolina's back with us on stage along with Luis. Did you guys have anything to add to the discussion? Because it got a bit too much about race. So I would love to go back to Arndt.
Yeah,
actually, you've got your hand up.
Not white, so let's hear from her.
Sure.
I mean, she's on the side of Bolsonaro.
I'll let Arndt. Yeah, I'll let Arndt go ahead then Carolina.
Okay,
Carolina,
Mario,
sorry.
you have brought up something about the corruption in Brazil, and I just would like to point out a few things here. When we look back 12 years ago, when PT, which is the left-wing party from Lula, started, we are actually having corruption in the last 12 years of government. And the way Lula does is we had 9 billion reals of money, which was stolen from Petrobras. And that money, part of the money was given back, believe it or not. And the whole population in Brazil, they know about it. Then millions and millions of money was returned by the Lava Jato, which is the car wash thing we had in Brazil. So all this money was returned to the government, and that's the way Lula actually governed Brazil for 12 years. And now it's just it's about to start it again. One of the ministers of Lula just got impeached because of corruption. They barely started, and they already have someone getting knocked out of the government.
But to be fair, he's not white, though.
Protocol. We just ended the race discussion. No need to joke about it.
Yeah,
Uh,
I'm not gonna get into the races. You know,
I'd rather just move away completely from it.
I
But
feel,
but David, super.
I feel really
Go ahead.
embarrassed that we have somebody like, Guta invited somebody like Izupiero to come on, because this is so embarrassing to have a Brazilian
Yeah,
person just, causing this mess. We should treat people with respect. So when you call somebody like as a white trash, that's not respectful. And
I'm trying to.
I mean, to
I
be
agree with
fair, I
the
am white trash though.
prodigal. Stop.
I
Let's
was the
just
one
go
who
back to,
called
and I
white
do.
trash.
I do just do. Dave, I superior. Again, I want to respect your pain. I'm sure there's reasons it's coming from, but obviously there's limits to what can be said. I do want to go to Luis. Luis, thanks for coming. Oh, sorry, Carolina. My apologies, Carolina. Go
Oh
ahead.
no, go ahead. Luis can go.
Luis, how are you?
Oh, how are you? Thank you, everybody, for the space. I'm Brazilian. I'm a physician and I work as a health correspondent for the radio and TV in Brazil. Actually, I'm living in the United States. And there's some things that I'm just entered in the room just right now. So maybe some things could be had appeared before. One thing, the movement that culminates with the insurrection thing in Brasilia today is not organic at all. They are well financed, have a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of company owners paying for the buses, paying for the food for the people. They move 120 buses from everywhere in Brazil to Brasilia. It not happens organically, big guys. Someone pays for that. Okay, you can say, oh, you don't have a focal point of the money to pay for everything. No, but you have a group of people paying for that. And I have a group of people organizing those guys through social media, especially on Telegram groups. I entered in a lot of Telegram groups last week following the movements, and people were asking for how can I join the caravan, and okay, did I have to pay for that? No, everything is free. You're gonna have money, you're gonna have food, you're gonna have places to stay, but we're gonna invade Brasilia. That's the point. It's not an organic movement. And there are a lot of other things planned for the next days. They are planning to create blockades on the roadways, on the roads, especially around the oil plants, oil refineries. They want to stop the flow of the gas and other fuels in Brazil. If it happens, it's going to be a great mess. Especially they are making convocations and asking people to move around a big oil refinery in Rio de Janeiro. Is Duque de Caxias refinery is one of the biggest in the country, and they are planning to blockade that refinery in this during the evening hours or the first hours of the next day, around 2 a.m. probably. They are posting that on Telegram. The crazy thing is, everything that I'm saying was posted on Telegram. So, first point, why I'm not asking for to know who is the people that must pay for that, but why the Brasilia government? Brasilia is like just like DC is a federal district. It works like an state, even smaller than any state in Brazil. And they have a governor. They have a guy that runs the public security. The first thing, the guy that runs the security in Brasilia was the
Go ahead.
justice minister for Bolsonaro until last week. It was crazy. And the governor hired him. And the first thing that he made, he went to Florida to meet Bolsonaro yesterday.
I'd love, yeah, we commented, actually, Matthew, I'd love your take on this, because another panelist mentioned that same point. By the way, if you're not speaking, please do mute your mic. Matthew, I'd love you to respond to that point, that the governor, I forgot his name, I think it's Anderson Torres.
Yes.
What's your take on him being in Bolsonaro and his lack of action? Because we've had a few panelists bring that point up.
I mean, I feel like there's a little tail wagging the dog. There have been organic protests. You've had tons of people in Brasilia, camping out. You've had people arrested in pre-dawn raids by the federal police force under Marias's directive in recent weeks, including a pastor. The fact that people are on the
Answer
ground,
the question.
they tell a pastor was dragged out of a tent at 4 a.m. 2 weeks ago and put in jail under Marias's directive. Rendition like you'd think would happen in Iran. So congratulations, quite a robust democracy you have. There have been so many people there. They've telegraphed for the last week that they're going to
Matthew,
march on.
answer the question.
So David, I'll let you respond. I promise. Your mic is really bad, by the way, David. So I'll let you fix that and then let you respond right after. Go ahead, Matthew.
That's probably coincidental divine intervention. Just editorializing.
Matthew.
The people have telegraphed for the last 5 or 7 days that they would really accelerate the marching on Brasilia. These were peaceful protests in theory. They obviously, when you have millions of people, and these people are so angry and they're so scared because they've had every indication their democracy is being stolen from them. Their constitutional republic, the Constitution is being eviscerated. We've talked about it ad nauseum. Some of the leftists here think, okay, censor people, everything's against the law if we don't like it. This is not fire in a crowded theater. This is you criticize politicians who are the wrong side, you get arrested. So people have seen this accelerate, and so obviously it's been a tinderbox, much like the Balkans ahead of World War I. And when tinderboxes exist, a very small match sets them off. And they went and they raided it. Nobody advocated it. We're going to read now and hear now in the next week from Marias and many parts of this new government that this was an orchestrated terrorist attack. Well, nobody, even looking at the videos live as it happened, would see there was directive. People just moved toward the buildings that represent the seat of power, and they started to occupy them. When leftists do it, when there's the summer of love in Milwaukee and Minnesota and all this, it's peaceful but fiery protests. Well, when rightists do it, it's a terrorist attack. And yes, there will be people arrested. It will probably catalyze an acceleration of the plan, which was already to mass arrest so many on the right.
Matthew, before I give David the mic to kind of balance out the discussion, I just have one point. So I'm getting messages from sources I trust. I don't want to imply anything, and I'll try to be as factual as I can. Sure. But there are people... Actually, look, before I mention it, I do want to just verify it with more sources to just make sure I don't imply something
let's
biased.
Crowdsource verification.
Yeah, exactly. So I'll might DM you about it, Matthew. But go ahead, David. I'll let you respond while I just verify that information. David, do you want to respond to what Matthew mentioned?
No,
yes.
I'd like to mention something before we we continue. There's this actor Rainn Wilson. He was he played the asshole in The Office, right? He's out there. If you look at his Twitter account, he's literally spreading disinformation right now about the riots in Brazil and claiming that this whole thing was staged in Florida. That MAGA supporters and conservatives are the ones behind it. So I just want to put that out there that is completely insane. And that is what, this whole situation, which is, I would argue it's a very localized situation for Brazil, right? It's being manipulated and used by a lot of, I would say liberal, not left-wing, but liberal mouthpieces like Rainn Wilson to try to perpetuate their own narrative and suppress conservatives in the United States and elsewhere.
I've been accused that I'm orchestrating all of it. So, talk about misinformation. I'm in Phoenix in a hotel room. I was supposed to be on a run right now.
So Mario, if I could speak to that, listen.
Yeah, please do. Just before you do, David, anyone that's not speaking, please mute your mic. There's a bit of feedback. Go ahead, David.
Okay. I'll try to be brief here. Not only I'm from Brazil, I'm also a researcher that studies the misinformation scheme in Brazil, because I have found the financial system that came from Bolsonaro's office while he was president. I got a death threat that it didn't allow me to go back to Brazil for 2 years. This is how violent Brazil became under Bolsonaro. During the elections, people got killed just because they said that they would vote for Lula. One example, one guy had a birthday party themed after the Workers' Party and Lula. One Bolsonaro supporter simply walked in there and said, "You cannot celebrate Lula here. This is a Bolsonaro space," and then shot him dead, shot other people from his family. And Bolsonaro never did anything, never sent sympathies, never tried to ask people to calm down. And that sort of feeling and environment was carried on throughout this election. Right after Bolsonaro was declared the loser, then all these people went out to military headquarters around Brazil, praying. They were praying for tires in the middle of the street. They had their smartphones up their heads, begging for extraterrestrial intervention in Brazil so something could be done that Bolsonaro will be put back in place. These people are not working properly. And guess what? Bolsonaro never did anything to bring Brazil back to a better place so the transition would actually happen. In fact, he ran away from the country for no reason. Nobody was going to arrest
so David,
him.
just so about running away, there's people that did mention that he ran away just in case he does get arrested or prosecuted.
Well, I think
definitely he was afraid of that, and he must be afraid of that because
the problem is. I'm just going to finish. I'm going to just say this now, and then I'm finished. Lula, as soon as he was getting into the involvement of Mensalão and car wash, guess what? People said that he was going to get arrested, and Moro and Deltan were arranging things to go after him. Guess what? He stayed in Brazil. Lula stayed. He never left. He never left to Venezuela. He never left to Cuba, as you guys love to say this. He stayed in Brazil. He was arrested, and then he's waiting for the justice to do their due process, their due work, and the results you may not like the results, but that was the results that set him free. But why do Bolsonaro have to leave? Why can't he stay and see what the judicial system says about him? Lula didn't leave. He stayed. So he's a coward.
Trump up charges against him. Everybody knows it. He used to say it's going to end with his arrest, his death, or victory. He said it over and over again. I guess
that's his problem. He can do whatever he wants, but he has to stay and face justice in the country that he committed so many crimes. This is the
Lula
thing.
faced justice, being let out in 580 days into a 12-year sentence.
But he stayed.
By the way, they just released the guy who was sentenced to 400.
He never left. He stayed in the country. You're making things up. You're bringing things out of your head.
Guys, just to balance it out again. So, David, you've made a good point. I'll let Matthew reply. By the way, Rose alerts, if there's any alerts or anything new from the ground, feel free to jump in and give us an update as always.
But I'm going to jump in real quick then on that. I'm going to jump in real quick on that then.
Yeah, of course, Nick.
It looks like
co-host, man.
Law enforcement has removed rioters from the Congress's lower house. This is according to law enforcement officials out there. So you take this as you will. And the military police have retaken control of the 3 Power Square right outside of the Presidential Palace, Congress, and Supreme Court buildings. And that's sort of what we are right now. And right now we have about 200 people arrested, and they've identified 40 buses that brought rioters to Brazil.
It's over 400 now.
Yeah, this is going to accelerate the like Casablanca, round up the usual suspects. They're going to round up everybody. Due process will be even more limited because due process was limited when they were censoring everybody and throwing people like Daniel Silveira under house arrest for a year, or Oswaldo Eustachio. So many journalists arrested over the last 2 years, accelerated over the last 2 months. And this is going to be very, very ugly for those patriots in Brazil who are scared about their loss of sovereignty. Their fears will be met with reality. But you want to know why Lula didn't leave? Because he knew that his friends in the judiciary, his overwhelming Supreme Court appointees. Luis lied before about saying the composition of the judiciary. 9 out of 11 were his people, him, Dilma, and Temer. The Supreme Electoral Court, he knew what was going to play out. And recently, they just let out of prison a guy who was convicted the most for everything in Lava Jato. 425-year sentence. The guy is out of prison now. So, they should call 3 Power Square 1 Power Square because it's in separated powers in name only. It is a judicial autocracy. It's been proven out over and over again in recent months.
Lula was released from prison not because the Supreme Court was beside Lula, because there were a serious mistake in how the whole investigation and the whole process was conducted by the judge himself. And
Wrong.
That's why. Okay.
We went over
and
this.
Even,
went over this in detail. You're lying.
Mario, can you please? Matthew is
me.
talking hours and he's cutting everybody. Are you guys going to talk to him?
I know. It's superior. Guta, go ahead. Finish your point. It's superior.
Okay.
Don't worry.
No, that's the point.
I have to worry because you are letting him cutting everyone.
Okay, superior last time, bro. Take it easy, man. Guta, go ahead. I'll let you make the point, and then we'll let Matthew reply again. Go ahead, Guta.
No. The whole thing is legal technicality, right? And that's the issue. And that's why Lula was released. right? The investigation and the whole process was conducted in a biased manner. And the judge broke the Chinese wall between himself and the main investigation or prosecutor, I forgot. Investigation. Yeah, the investigator. And that's why that 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 he was convicted over, I believe, the refurbish of the apartment in Guarujá, if I'm not mistaken, and that's why it was released, because the process was not conducted in a
I'll go.
legal right manner.
So that
Okay,
is
I want
something
to.
I've written
I'll
about
let.
in
I'll let you
depth.
reply, Matthew. I'll let you reply just
Please.
quickly before Matthew replies. Just for anyone on the ground in Brazil, please do message me if you want to speak. I know I'm getting a lot of requests because we cannot see hands that are up, so you have to DM me and the team will bring you up. Matthew, I'll let you respond to that point before we go to Arndt and Luis and then Carolina.
We have discussed this in depth previously, but I will reiterate. You are reiterating and just regurgitating a talking point of Global Fall on CNN, that there was some jurisdictional technicality. No, that is a fallacious lie. 3 courts, 19 judges, 12 charges, and that was just the start. They sentenced him to prison for 12 years, and they let him out after 580 days. His appointees, Edson Fachin, his appointee, oversaw his release out of the Supreme Court. And then they illegally annulled the sentences, gave him a never-ending pending appeal, and in the middle of that, they then vacated all of those charges, totally illegally. There was no justification for vacating these charges. Most people don't deny in Brazil, even lefties, even people who voted for him, that he was involved in public corruption. The same public corruption that ensnared Dilma, the same public corruption that ensnared dozens of others, including this guy who was sentenced to 425 years that they released last week. So what you're saying, you can say the sky's purple all you want, doesn't make the sky purple. Maybe to global readers, you can hear that and then give us a justification in cocktail parties when you're arguing amongst yourselves, but that is not reality. You can read the court cases, 19 judges unanimously. None of them said that there was any jurisdictional issue to hear this case because he robbed the assets
Mario.
of everybody in Brazil. Everybody in Brazil was stolen.
Matthew, I wanna ask you a question quickly, Matthew, if you don't mind. Just moving off to a different point.
Mario, but I think you are allowing him to talk too much. He's extremely right. I don't think
hello,
I don't think it's a good idea.
Absolutely right.
He's extremely right.
Gutta,
he's
Gutta,
Superior.
Gutta, do you wanna reply to the point, Gutta? And then I wanna ask a question that's so the news that I'm getting, Gutta, I'll let you reply. Then I will go to the thing that I've been, not sure whether I should share or not. I will share it and get the panelists' opinion, and feel free to push back on it because it is speculation that I've been receiving. But go ahead, Gutta. I'll let you quickly reply to the point
Matthew.
made by Matthew. Go ahead.
Just Matthew, just for the record, I didn't say that Lula was not involved in corruption. I just mentioned that the process that he was convicted was not correct, and that's why the Supreme Court let him out. Okay, legal technicality, that's what I said. All right, and again, I repeat what I've been saying all along. I'm not Lula, I'm not Bolsonaro. I'm Brazilian, I'm pro-Brazil. And corruption is endemic and systemic in the country. Doesn't matter who is there. You were talking about Petrobras. Read the biography of the ex-military president Geisel and of corruption inside Petrobras. So it's not Lula or it's not Bolsonaro. The corruption is in the country as a system, and people are part of it. What they have to do is to have the courage to dismantle it. And that's the issue of Brazil and many other countries in Latin America.
I agree there's corruption, and it's really refreshing for you to say for all to hear, recorded for posterity, you agree Lula was guilty of public corruption, so he should still be in jail.
I did not say
that.
either.
And you said that You said that Lula. Appreciate that.
So
That's
sorry,
honest.
Matthew, can you hear me?
But the
Okay.
technicality is nonsense. They backed into a technicality to release him because they thought that he would be the best optical figure that they can manipulate and coerce an election from and censor all the opposition and get everyone behind Lula.
Matthew, I think this is a good question for you. So we know Bolsonaro is in Florida, and we know that. Let me just go. I'm going through all the sources. We know that I forgot his name. Oh, Mr. Torres is also in Florida. Correct me if I'm wrong, anyone. And he said that it's. There's a tweet here. Let me just check it. I did not. He says the following: I did not go to meet Bolsonaro. There was no plot. That was by Anderson Torres. I just got that tweet now. And he didn't tweet that, but that's what I'm not sure. I don't think he tweeted that. And then someone sent me information, and that's I'm not causation correlation. I'm just going to share the information and let you push back on it, Matthew. Is that we've had people that were involved in organizing the January 6 events. One or two people confirmed that they're also going to Florida. Now I speculate that this is just to gain attention and it's unrelated. And I don't want to imply anything. I'm just mentioning it. Would love your take on it. Again, my point is not to imply anything. Just thought
Sure.
it's worth mentioning because many people are DMing me about it.
I think it's organic. I have seen protesters, obviously they've been camped out there en masse, and people come from all over the country to the Capitol to protest, especially on weekends. But I saw for the last 5 to 7 days that they were floating flyers, rally for Brasilia, for Brazilian sovereignty, et cetera, et cetera. So I believe there is an organic look. I'm reading all the time, even in, over the last few months in the New York Times and the Washington Post and other places that, Steve Bannon and myself have organized the entire protest movement of Brazil as if that was even theoretically possible. So that's a lot of nonsense. I think it was organic. I think it went too far. I don't think there was a Ray Epps in this case. I think it was a tinderbox that people in heightened emotional state of fear and anger about their loss of sovereignty and the evisceration of their constitution marched and started taking over the seats of power, especially since they were empty, especially since there was not a police presence there. We could debate about, did people hear that was there going to be something like this? Why didn't they reinforce it? The same debate we're having about January 6th and the Capitol Hill Police who report to the speaker who was conveniently filming a documentary that day about her leadership. Why did Marxists?
Yeah, look, it's insanely polarizing, the politics in Brazil. Like I do panels like this all the time where we have. I'm just going to mute everyone because someone's unmuting. Please make sure you're muted when you're not speaking, just to avoid feedback. But I do panels, and by the way, I'm not sure if you're getting some of the DMs, Ian and Nick. But I do panels that are balanced with both sides of the aisle, debating on every topic, on every discussion, even outside of politics. But never have I received as many DMs as today. People tell me, Mario, you've got so many people from the right. That's just, how is that not biased? And at the same time, people from the left, people from the right, like Mario, this is a leftist discussion. No one from the right to debate it. Guys, we're trying to bring people from both sides of the argument to debate. It's not going to be 50-50 at all times. So just ease up with the DMs, and we're giving it our best. If you want to come up and speak,
I think you're doing I think you're doing a great job, and I think the fact that it has a plurality of viewpoints is wonderful. You never see anybody on the right saying cancel and silence my opposition. That is of the purview of the left, where they say we need to marginalize them because their views are so abhorrent. We can't even hear them.
I'll push back on this one a bit, Matthew. I don't push back a lot, but I'm getting a lot of people DMing me from the right as well, saying the same thing. Well, so it is balanced. But I get your point. Like if we go back to the Twitter files, obviously it's obviously more biased to the left, at least in the US, in that particular point. But I want to go to Luis, who was with us earlier and had his hand up for a while. Luis, I'd love your take on this, and I know Carolina's been waiting as well. But Luis, go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Mario. I just want to point out to people in the United States one thing. You have a democracy here for more than 200 years, with the problems, better times, worse times, but you have a democracy for 200 years. You have to understand that in Brazil, we have a democracy that have only 37 years. We live on a dictatorship from 64 to 85. Just after that, we restart our democracy process. What happened during the dictatorship? We have a complete annihilation of the political education of people, something that you have here in the United States in the schools. People learn how to point out their positions, learn how to speak to people, learn how to point themselves. So I believe that something that anyone in the United States looking to Brazil must think about it. We are in the beginning of rebirth our democracy. It's a very important point. So we have very weak our check and balance systems are very weak. They are not capable sometimes to be able to repair the things and put the things in perspective. So it's something that I believe is important for someone from outside, a foreigner, even if they live in Brazil for some time or not. But it's pretty important because we had and the point of the corruptions is something that in the roots of our country. It came with the with the Portuguese people in the boats in the during the 15th century, because another thing that's pretty different from the formation of United States as a country and Brazil as a country. People that moved to United States moved from problems in Europe, from religious persecution in England and in other places, and came here to stay, to create a new country. In Brazil, we receive in the beginning, just like people that came to explore the country, just like to pick up natural resources and send back to Portugal, just like minerals or any kind of wood or spices, whatever. That's a pretty big difference. So, because the people that went originally to Brazil, they are not to colonize the country; they are just to exploit the country. So it's something that was in the roots of our formation. We have to learn how to change it. Now we are learning. We learn how to move from one military dictatorship to a democracy. We have president that was impeached, just like Collor, and so that we are learning how the democracy used to change. It's something that I want
I
to
just want to
point out.
mention yeah, sure, nothing major. Just Bolsonaro's nephew apparently was in. Okay, I just want to fix the tweet, but was apparently in Congress as well, part of the protest. But I let Luis, thanks for sharing this. Arndt and Carolina, do you want to respond to that point?
Well, I wanted to respond to a point earlier, and then also touching on the base of the division between left and right.
Ladies first. Carolina,
Thank
go
you. I
ahead.
appreciate you. I appreciate you
Yeah,
very
she's
much.
speaking already. Yeah.
He might not be able to hear me.
Yeah.
So based on the whole right or left, I consider myself to be a very strong Christian and more than anything a constitutionalist. I feel like I have an oath to my constitution. Touching on his earlier point about insurrection or protest, people have the right to protest in any traditional sense, the street, sidewalks, park, and also coordinating. I know a lot of people are asking, okay, this was planned, this was not planned. Organic grassroots movements a lot of the times have every single right to go and protest. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the convoy in 1973, where it was an incredible opportunity for convoy truck drivers to make a statement on an incredibly powerful historical moment that we don't even know about history anymore. So truckers shut down, over the oil prices. So yes, we are 100% entitled to protest. I mean, this is here in America. This title is about Brazil J6. Was it a J6? I believe so. I mean, I've gone over this material. I've had so many people give me a lot of evidence, and I'm supposed to send Ian. Thank you, Ian, for bringing up a great point earlier. What I want to say about Brazil, we had artificial intelligence report that the same way that they did with Parler, people were pretty much utilized with the pinging and geolocations and facial recognition to figure out which ones they were going to censor. I think it was Arndt who said, or I don't know what the other guy's name was here, saying that it was the left that was completely censored in Brazil. That is absolutely not true. The reports show that as of right now, after this entire ordeal, 400 or plus people are not going to have access to WhatsApp or to communicate and let us know the side of the story. So this is why for me it was so important that I got in the streets, word of mouth, face to face. If I cannot organize something grassroots and have somebody's phone number and text me or email me, I don't even get involved. So staying off of social media is great. Mario, you touched on the base of yes, there's a lot of conservatives. I don't know if Pam is in the building. She is a 70-year-old lady who had cancer, and she was still having to go to jail for 60 days, at 70 years old, going through cancer. She was at the J6, she was trampled over, pushed into the building. And, how can we treat people like this when they're, inhumane conditions right now? And that's really my focus right now, because I know that Brazil is going to have the same thing happening. So people have the right to protest. And again, I don't know the constitution of Brazil, but I would love to hear from anybody. But você me fala, eu preciso falar português for the people listening. So você me liga. And that's what I have to say. I have a few more things to say, but if you need to drop me, that's great. I'll be here.
Oh, very nice of you, Carolina. Go ahead.
What you would like to know about the Constitution, Carolina?
So we have the First Amendment. So, for example, when I coordinate with organizations here in the U.S., number one, I tell them that they have to have a private membership association before I even get engaged, because I don't like my government in my business. Then we do that just for banking purposes. So I don't know what your constitutional rights, this type of unincorporated organizations that I deal with, we leave the government out of our business so that we can actually carry it out our constitutional rights. We have the First Amendment, 14th Amendment protecting that, as well as the 5th and the 9th Amendment. So I don't know if you guys have any type of protections as well. For example, I know this isn't the topic of Ukraine, but in Ukraine they signed law to pretty much censor anybody who they want in the journalistic sense. So I want to know what type of rights do you have in your constitution that truly protects freedom of speech and assembly?
Okay, Brazilian constitution does protect the freedom of speech and the right to assemble. Okay, but there's one difference I'm just going to say this very quick because we had a lot of debates about before. But the bigger difference between the American freedom of speech concept and ours is that in Brazil, we have also speeches that are considered crime. So if your speech implies in this category, like, for example, racism is hate crime, it's hate speech, you're not allowed, it's a crime. You can sue me, I can get arrested, right? So that's the difference.
So what you're saying, it's a criminal offense.
Exactly, it is a criminal offense.
And would you would you consider that too extreme, or would you consider that fair? How's the sentiment in Brazil around that those laws?
Most Brazilians actually, I think, believe that it's fair that hate speech is considered a criminal offense, right? I'm an absolutist, so I'm an exception that I think it shouldn't be, and people should. I mean, I basically think that for me to have the right to be here and to say what I want to say, I have to put up and listen to anything and anybody else. Doesn't matter if I agree or not, and with respect. And on this one, I actually have to thank you for the space again, marvelous, and ask you to bring it up, Piotr, Davi Michel Zuzman, and Eduardo Cavendish. Eduardo and David, both Brazilians, and great defenders on Brazilian democracy, each on their own positions. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Message me whoever you think I should invite and their position. It would be great to get them on. And I also want to welcome Tom and Piotr on stage.
I'll send it to you.
Thank you so much, Peter. I'll look at it now. Before we go to Piotr, and Tom, you're welcome to jump in at any time. You're a regular, so appreciate you being here. I do want to just get a quick update from the ground. Rose alerts, anything new? It seems to be quieting down for you to be this quiet in the back, but anything interesting?
I'm trying to look and find any information, but it seems like everything is dying down since it's getting later in Brazil. But yeah, nothing too major.
And now we're seeing the response from go ahead, Nick.
We're working on getting on the ground reporters in here. She's uploading more intel right now, and is about to come into space and speak.
Perfect. That's great. We'll go to Piotr and then, of course, Tom. Piotr, go ahead, man. Good to have you back.
Yeah, thanks, Mario. Sorry, I've been offline for March, but as soon as I saw what was happening in Brazil, I've been following this all day. I just haven't had an internet connection stable enough to join or make a space. Look, there's a few things I want to mention here. Guta, lovely to see you up on stage. Mario, glad to see you brought Guta up. I'm a good friend of her. We go back a long way to Clubhouse.
Yeah, we can't hear you. Piotr, your mic is really
can
bad.
Can you hear that? Is that better?
Yeah, better. Yeah, of course. Yeah, thanks for the kind words. Let's jump to the discussion. Go ahead, man.
So what we're seeing here is Brazil's version of January 6th. I find it quite befitting that this has happened less than 2 days after, the three-year anniversary of Brazil. But there's one main point here, which is that world leaders across the world have come out in support of Lula, and that includes Maduro. Maduro is not a democratically recognized leader, and he's not popular amongst many Venezuelans. And yet even he, someone who is sanctioned to the teeth by the Americans, has come out in support of Lula. Now, Maduro is very left-wing, like Lula, but clearly there is something that is going on with this attempted coup, in some people's words, not necessarily mine, on the Congress of Brazil, which is very significant. Now, Bolsonaro hasn't uttered a word. He's remained very mute on this, and he was even seen in a supermarket in Florida a few days ago, just sort of living up the American Floridian lifestyle. And it's quite interesting that at this moment where people are basically going to the Capitol or equivalent to try and retake back what they feel was a rigged election, he hasn't come out in support of them. So that's quite revealing. Equally, when the election was happening in Brazil, we did see that the military did not act in kind. Bolsonaro being a military man himself with his legacy, there was a lot of hope, I think, by some people in his camp that the military would sort of come to his unofficial position of like, well, he deserves to remain in power. Lula has sort of taken this unfairly, but they didn't, and it was pushed to the constitution. And largely speaking, the military have abided by the election result. So I think what we're seeing here is a pretty intense threat to Brazil's democracy. But it clearly shows you that the majority of people, let's not forget that the people who protest don't always often reflect the majority. They represent a fringe and sometimes very particular subset of people. And whilst I want to appreciate their perspectives and concerns about Lula incoming, Lula has a lot of his own issues. I'm certainly not going to deny that the car wash scandal of 2015-16 and some of the other corruption charges that he's been involved with are not important. They definitely need to be continued to be investigated, and he needs to be held accountable. But this was a legitimate election, and Lula was beat him. It was a very close election, but Lula did beat him. And I think that we need to take stock of that. And the fact that you've got also Gabriel Boric of Chile, you've got other members of the Latin American, what's known as the Pink Tide. So the fact that you've had lots of left-wing leaders coming in on the back of a blue tide motion, coming behind this is indicative that he is supported. So, I think that this is an intense moment, but I don't see this carrying on days from now. It's unfortunate that this has happened, and it shows you the fragility that democracy has, and that it's something that has to be continually nurtured, and that autocratic tendencies exist, and we must acknowledge those. But at the moment, from the contacts I have on the ground, to quote what Raw was saying, it is beginning to wind down, and I don't think it's going to be as intense, but you're definitely going to see a sustainment of tensions in the next few days.
Thanks for the overview, man. Appreciate you being here. Tom, good to have you back.
Good to be with you all.
Hey, Tom. How's it going?
Hey, Ian. And Matthew, appreciate you defending the